Welcome, Wapham crew. Secure your tinfoil hats, buckle down tight, and hold on loosely as we soar over the rocky tops of the La Platas on a rocky mountain high, get sucked into the vortex of the Four Corners, and settle down snugly at mile marker 420 in colorful Colorado. It is Saturday, January 8th, Sunday, January 9th. For those of you across the pond and beyond, welcome to We Are Paradox Media's Late Night in the Rockies. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to you. It's such a pleasure to have you here this evening. Luckily, we're not doing replays this weekend. Really missed you guys and really wanted to come back. And like the guest and I were discussing, it's Elvis's birthday. So I just had to be here to discuss this book that we're going to be talking about this evening. But if you're joining us right now, live, you're joining us on Spreaker.com under We Are Paradox Media. You're also joining us on KPNL Radio, which you can find at kpnl-db.com. Make sure on your free time, whether you're working out, or working it, that you're listening to us on Spreaker, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, iTunes, iHeartRadio, CastBox, Tumblr, SoundCloud, TuneIn Radio, Deezer, Podcast Addict, and Podcast Chaser. Go over to our YouTube channel and make sure you give that bell a little tickle. That way, next time we have an episode come out, you will be notified. Make sure you follow us on Facebook and Twitter as well. We got a lot of fun stuff going on over there. So tonight I have a treat for all my guys and gals out there. And last time we had this guest on, he's one of my favorite authors. I did his bio, but it was very, very long and drawn out, and it seemed to make him uncomfortable. So I just have to let you guys know, Steve B Ubaney, Stephen, he is amazing. He's put so much work into these books, and he's got another one on the way, the Tesla book, that I can't wait to read. But today is Presley's birthday, and we're doing the book Who Murdered Elvis Presley. Welcome, Stephen, and thanks so much for coming on the show this evening.
Hey, it's a real treat to be back on your show.
And happy Elvis's birthday. Did you do anything fun for Elvis's birthday today?
I did not. I live in Western New York, and it's 19 degrees, and
oh yeah,
that's not conducive to fun. But no, I wonder how old Elvis would be. But wow, this should be a national holiday. It really should. Well, hell, my birthday should be a national holiday. I think it's like September 18th is my birthday. I think it's the most popular birthday.
Right?
Those mid-September are the most popular birthdays because of New Year's Eve and then 9 months. It just kind of happens that way. But yeah, Elvis, it's hard to believe. It's hard to believe it's his birthday again. I was just on a show. It seems like it was last week. It was a whole year ago, and it was his birthday again. It's really something.
I know, time flies
really
by so
else.
crazy these days. I don't know if it's like the older we get, the faster it goes, or I don't know if it's any funner it goes faster. I'm not sure exactly what's going on. It seems like highway robbery.
Did you make a New Year's resolution?
Stay alive.
Yeah, I'm very happy that you're doing as well as you are. Yeah, I've been under the weather a little bit. In this dog-eat-dog world, I had to make a New Year's resolution. I had to ask myself if I was going to be a hot dog for another year or just a little wiener. I decided to stay just a little wiener for one more book. I have one more book in the end, and then I'm going to go hot dog around and do something else. But that's my New Year's resolution. I'll be a little wiener for one more book.
I'm a wiener. I like that. Yeah, somebody asked me that the other day. Oh, I got so many resolutions. What are your resolutions? And I'm like, stay alive and stay out of the hospital. Those are my plans for the long haul here, because who knows how long this COVID crap is going to last. It hit me on the 21st of December, and it kind of eked its way in. We did our little Christmas gathering, and then the very next day I did a replay, and next weekend as well, and just been loving on my bed and trying to stay warm and such. But it's scary stuff. The kids are really resilient. It hit them. They had the fever for a little bit, and then they're bouncing off the walls. I wish I was that resilient.
Yeah, it's a bad thing. I don't. Why don't they just come out and be honest with us and tell us they don't know what the hell's going to fix it? Why don't they just be honest with us? Everybody, they told you the truth 5 different ways. None of it works. And it's like, just come out and tell us. We really don't know what to do. I think people could understand that better than, don't wear a mask, wear two masks, stand in the corner, stand on one foot. I mean, they told us everything.
Right?
It's just so damn crazy. It's like, and of course that's me. I mean, I look at things a little bit different. Where would the world be without people like me? Some people are afraid of heights. I'm afraid of wits.
I'm
I'm a
afraid of
little
half
different.
wits.
Oh, God. Oh, man.
I have a couple nephews that are half wit, and yeah, what can you do?
We are having way too much damn fun on this show.
Hey, that's my number one rule. You gotta have fun.
You're going to have to send me the URL. You don't know how many people. I started a Facebook group about this book, and it's Elvis, Who Murdered Him? Okay, so everybody can join. There's myself and another woman, Judy Hunter, who lives outside of London, who's a super great researcher. She's actually been into this as long or maybe even longer than I have. And we didn't know about each other. So here we are in two separate parts of the world doing all this research. And I had, she contacted me on Facebook. She read my book. And I'm on Facebook. You pop in and say hi, Steve Ubaney on Facebook. I'm on Twitter, blah, blah. And she said, oh, my God, I just read your book. She said, you have no idea how right you are. And I'm thinking, well, that's nice to hear, So we started this ongoing conversation. We've had a bunch of Skypes back and forth. Super nice lady. And together we started this group, Elvis, Who Murdered Him. So if you're on Facebook and you had the occasion to poke around, please join the group. There's lots of information there, stuff that I'll cover here and stuff that I won't have time to cover. But it's interesting. I also started one for the Princess Diana book that I wrote, and it's Princess Diana, Who Murdered Her. So feel free to join both groups. Pretty fascinating stuff.
That's awesome. Yeah, I have looked on Facebook for you before. I think when I first got your books and trying to get more in with all the books and the groups and everything going on there, but I couldn't find it. But perhaps I was looking for the wrong thing. So thank you for telling our listeners and myself how to find you on there. Because I did look and I'm like, no, I guess he's not on Facebook, because a lot of people don't. They won't go on Facebook. But I'm so glad you guys did that. That's awesome.
Yep. Facebook is a changing world. They've recently come under the umbrella of a name change of Meta, which is going to be different. I don't know. Social media is changing like crazy, I mean, in a blink, everything changes, and we were warned. We were told it was going to be like this. George Orwell in 1984 warned us this was going to be like this. They've fiber connected everybody's little eager impulse around the world, and now nothing's right. Everything from social media to the stock markets on jerk alert all the time. It's an amazing thing. We're living in fantastic times. It's it's really something else when you stop and think about the things that I've seen in my life. And you're right. You know what? My bio is too long, and I wouldn't put you through that.
Well, I read it and I enjoyed it, but it just seemed like it made you uncomfortable because you're like, man, that's so long, and I don't know if you wanted to update it or something, but I'm like, I'm not going to put him through that again.
You can do anything you want. Nothing makes me uncomfortable. But yeah, I mean, it's go to whomurderedbooks.com. Check out my bio if you want to faint. I mean, I had no idea I was related to all these people. I mean, we go back to the Mayflower and Winston Churchill, and it's amazing. It's
Chevy Chase. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, do your genealogy. I have no idea who you might be related. So we came over on the Mayflower and we fought in the Revolution, and it's crazy. It's crazy stuff. And then here came me. What a disappointment I've been with that.
Oh, come on.
That long line of presidents, and I'm related to Marilyn Monroe and a couple presidents I don't like. It's very interesting. I mean, it's amazing. So I was destined to do something, and I guess this is it.
So what got you into the world of writing? Was it just, being intrigued by these different topics, and then you decided, hey, if I'm going to put this much time into it, I'm going to write about it? Or how exactly did you get onto writing about these things?
Well, I've always been fascinated by history. always. And I've looked into these things that I've written about in multiple other things. But these are the ones, Elvis, FDR, Diana, Tesla. These are the ones that for me just screamed out. And when I write these books, I write them, there's so little justice left in this world. This world is so off kilter.
It's so bad.
The table is tilted, folks. The game is rigged. Okay. It's a big club, just like George Carlin said, and we are not in it. We are not in the big club. So if I can do my little part to do justice to these people who have been maligned in history, I'll do it. I think that if Elvis and FDR and Princess Diana, I almost said Marilyn Monroe, another one of my cousins, if they could read these books, I think that they would. I think that they'd smile because finally someone's telling the truth. So you have to be asked questions. You have to be inquisitive. So you kind of mix it all up between liking history and being inquisitive, and this is just kind of how I got here. I have 4 college degrees. Don't ever do that. Just takes the fun right out of life.
Right?
I hope I never see, when I took my last test, true story, I put my pen down on the desk, right? And I'd snapped a picture of it. I snapped a picture of my pen on the desk. That's it. I'm never looking at another book again unless I want to look at it. So it's just kind of funny. I have a real inquisitive mind. And, you have to ask a lot of questions, like, it's crazy. I was also an honor student in school. Yes, Your Honor. No, Your Honor. Nice tie, Your Honor. Stuff like that. Yes, I was here last week, Your Honor.
Lovely weather we're having, Your Honor.
Yeah, but you have to have that inquisitive mind, and I think that's one of the things that really keeps me going. I need to know. I need to know these things. So I dig these things up in history. I'm actually a history detective. I guess I deal with conspiracies. I fall over them all the time, and I know them when I see them. But for me, I'm kind of a history detective. I go back in time, and I find new evidence, and then I put it together. And my books solve these celebrity cold cases. And I wish I knew how I ended up doing this, but it's kind of an interesting concoction of things. And people like the books. It's everybody has to have their own special sauce.
That's a good way to put it. Yeah,
you have to have people out there ask questions like me. I used to drive my teachers crazy with questions. My professors used to love me and hate me at the same time. I'd say, what's another word for thesaurus? It used to drive them crazy all the time. If I shot a mime, would I have to use a silencer? I used to ask all these questions, and it would just drive them absolutely out of their minds. I asked my science teacher if I melted dry ice, could I swim without getting wet? This used to piss them off, something awful. So this is the kind of person that I am. I have to know. So that's how it's a concoction of where these books came from.
Yeah, I heard a mime is a terrible thing to waste, but I disagree.
And if you look at it, absolutely. This Elvis book has really turned everybody on their ear, because nobody's supposed to talk about this. This is forbidden fruit. You're not supposed to. This has been whispered about in Memphis for years. And I was really surprised. I thought that I was the only one who figured out that he was murdered. Just a backdrop on me. I'm a huge Elvis Presley fan. I always have been. I grew up spinning the original 45s because, number one, I'm old. And number two, my mom, my mom fell in love with this guy ever since she's been 11, So Elvis came. The reason why he's such a big deal and he won't go away, and he's never going to go away, and I hope he doesn't, is because Elvis had that rocket ride in 1955, 1956. He was on the Louisiana hayride, 54, 55, and he was just about to explode. And then he met Colonel Parker, who pushed him in the national stage, and it was a rocket ride. in 56. You know, I mean, he just took the world by storm. But at the same time Elvis Presley came out, so did television. So Elvis Presley was kind of born in America with television. And so did portable record players. Prior to portable record players, you know, you were all listening to the radio, which was the size of a piece of furniture in the living room, and whatever your parents were listening to, you were listening to. If it was How Much Was That Doggy in the Window, that's what you were listening to.
Right? Radios were huge back then. I mean, they're huge still to me today, but as far as size, it's like, holy crap, we need about 3 people to move this thing.
Yeah, it was, you know, I mean, they were big tubes. They were tube radios. I mean, they were substantial. So here we have Elvis coming into age with television, portable record players. For the first time, kids had a music of their own and they could take it with them. So because Elvis Presley is so baked in the cake of Americana, he's never going to go away.
I hope not.
I thought the music was fantastic. He had the most unique sound of anybody. He would cover a song of somebody else's, and he always did it better.
I love the soul and bluesy sort of thing he had going on, and it always made me wonder. One of the songs that always come to my head is "In the Ghetto," and he kind of did start off in the ghetto, not as we see it today, but as it was back in the day. And just his beginning, we skipped over all that stuff, but the way he came into the world, holy shnikes, what a freaking blessing.
Yeah, he was, I go into it in depth. Now, you've read the book, right? Did you finish it?
Sorry, I pressed the wrong button. Yes, I did. I read the original one, and then I read the anniversary one.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that, with all that time in bed doing nothing, I guess you had time to read, didn't you?
Well, it was actually that week before we did our first show, and I thought we were going to talk about all the books, and then you're like, no way can we talk about all the books on one show. But so I've been prepped. Mostly I've been sleeping with this COVID stuff going on. I didn't even think I could sleep so much anymore, but it's been delightful in a sense, but at the same time, had I had to read these books, I'm not saying it would have been hard because I love your books and they're so easy to get into. I still would have been able to read them, but yeah, luckily I was able to rest and still be here for the show this evening.
For sure. I definitely understand that. I'm glad you're feeling better. COVID's not a joke, folks. But in the book, I lay out all of Elvis's backdrop and how he was born and the circumstances surrounding his. He was dirt poor. He was, his parents raised him in a little shack that they built by themselves, just before Christmas, because they were expecting, a baby, and Elvis was actually born in the house, along with his stillborn twin, and that spawned a new conspiracy thing that Elvis had 3 brothers, and Jesse's still alive, and they have Johnny and Clayton and, all these brothers. And I know the guy who's behind that, and I'm friends with him. I'm friendly with him. I can't say he's my friend, but I'm friendly with him. I'm on good terms with him. I just don't happen to agree with him. I think Jesse was stillborn. And they have, footage, snapshots taken, there's a mole here, there's a mole here. And I think this is all Photoshopped. I know people who work both sides of the law with equal skill. I know some people in the government. Those people, if they existed, they would have paperwork. They would have driver's licenses. They would have social security cards. They would have something they don't. So I want to just put that to rest. It would be nice if there were 4 or 5 brothers that looked like Elvis, but there wasn't. So here he comes. He's stillborn. His father gets arrested for this one will really make you laugh. His father gets arrested because they were raising a pig to slaughter.
This is ridiculous, you guys.
and this is true, you can't make this up. They were raising a pig to slaughter. Elvis's father's name was Vernon Presley, and they were very, very poor. This was before welfare states or social assistance, and they were in the Deep South. They were in Tupelo, Mississippi, which is a great town, by the way. They were raising a pig to slaughter because Vernon Presley was trying to figure out how he was going to feed his family. So him and a couple other guys were raising this pig to slaughter, and when they went to sell it, the guy didn't give them the amount of money that they thought it was worth. So what they did is they put a number in front of the number that he put down. So instead of $5, it was $15. And they cashed it. And Elvis Presley's father went to jail for a time. And anyway, long story. His background is incredible. This is why he was so incredibly tight with his mother, because it was just those two. And they actually lost the little house that they built and everything. Elvis had a terrible, terrible upbringing. And I wouldn't wish that on anybody, really. So he was raised. Most of his friends were in the colored sections, and he went to the gospel church, and the majority of it were people of color. And I think that's where that fantastic musical style came from. It was a bluesy
Southern
gospel,
Baptist or something, yeah.
You know, he mixed actually country, blues, and gospel, rhythm and blues, and he mixed it all up and made his own thing, you know. And the best ones do. You know, you look at Muhammad Ali. He mixed boxing styles. He went to two different boxing coaches, and he mixed the styles together and came up with something. The best do that. So this is the backdrop on Elvis and his upbringing. And so 56 happens, and he gets discovered. Partially, he's on the Louisiana hayride, doing the circuit, doing fairs and carnivals, and trying, you know, and he's impressing people, but he's still trying to get his sea legs. You know, he's still trying to figure it out. So along comes, he's outgrowing the fella at Sun Records, and his name's escaping me here. Oh boy, what's his name? Sam Phillips. There you go. I knew it would come up. Elvis was outgrowing Sam Phillips at Sun Records. Sam Phillips knew he was an incredible star, and he knew he was going to go places, but he ended up in some financial trouble, and he had to sell his contract. And Sam Phillips was good to Elvis. He was fair with him. But
I know, I wish he could have kept him, because that would have been better in the long run.
Oh, yeah. And he just knew, he said, look, this kid needs bigger star power than I can give him, and I need the money. So they always stayed friends. And pardon me. So he sells this his contract to Colonel Tom Parker, who probably is one of the people that I loathe the most in history. He's really he's just a scumbag. I can't come up with a different word. I'm sorry.
Yeah, if you look in the dictionary under dirtbag or douchebag, aka scumbag, you'll see this guy's picture.
Yeah, this guy really, he was really something. He was really something. He knew the significance of Elvis Presley. Here's a white kid who sounded very, very black. And without Elvis, look, somebody had to be first. Somebody had to pierce the veil.
Wasn't that one of the big surprises, though? Like, everybody heard his voice and everything like that, and then when they finally saw his picture, they're like, what the who, what?
Yeah. He was, they were playing his music on the radio in Memphis. His family had moved from Tupelo to Memphis. It's all in the book. It's well documented. And Elvis went to the movies. He was so nervous he couldn't stand it. Couldn't stand to hear himself on the radio. So he went to the movies. And people kept calling in asking the disc jockey to play that song over and over again, and they wanted more information on him. And when the DJ told everybody he was from Humes High School, everybody's like, wait a minute, that's a white high school, because it was a segregated South. And it boggled their mind. This kid he's not a black kid. This is a white kid sounding like this. So I mean, without Elvis piercing that veil, there were all kinds of fantastic colored singers who were not getting record deals because it just wasn't heard of. Without Elvis, there would have been none of them on record. There would never have been Michael Jackson or Motown. And on Beale Street was really the music center of Memphis. And Elvis was a little young, so he couldn't get into the clubs and the bars to listen to the music that he loved. And he became really good friends with B.B. King.
Well, didn't he used to like hang out in the back and like peek through the windows and stuff? And sometimes they'd let him in, but for the most part, he couldn't because, like you said, he was too young.
Yeah, he would he was friends with B.B. King, so B.B. King talked to the owner and he'd get him in. And there's a lot of stories B.B. King told me about a young Elvis, but
I love B.B.
He was Elvis was a very nice, respectful young man. He was really a great kid. I'm sorry that I wasn't alive during that time because I think I really would have enjoyed meeting him. But this is really his musical influence. He loved that rhythm and blues music, and he was really a student of music. You know, I mean this guy would he would figure out what everyone was doing and figure out his own way. So all of that went into making, Motown and Michael Jackson and all of that. There would have been no British invasion without it. There would never have been black artists on record. Someone had to be first. And Elvis Presley was that guy, and he paid an incredible price for it. So, I mean, they ended up they wouldn't play his music. They said it was devil music, and the churches boycotted him. It's just unbelievable today.
Well, and I think a lot of it is funny because it's not just the music. A lot of it had to do with the gyrating of the hips and the way he would dance and stuff. And they're like, oh, no, we can't have this, which led to other things. But, I mean, I don't know. Just because it touches your soul in a certain way. And, yes, there was the whole, fan fever girl thing going on where everybody's fainting and losing their ever-loving minds. Kind of like with the Beatles as well. Man, let talent be talent. I don't know what's so scary about it.
We were a simple people, weren't we?
Right?
I mean, all he did was just jiggle a little. I mean, look what's on stage now, But it's really something else. So back to Colonel Parker. You can't talk about Elvis Presley and his ride to fame without talking about this idiot, Colonel Parker, who was a very colorful person in history. Okay, he wasn't a colonel, and his name wasn't Tom Parker. This guy was really. This could never happen again. I hear people say, who's going to be the next Elvis Presley? It's like saying, when's the first moon launch going to happen again? This is something that'll never happen again. So because believe it or not, folks, there was a time before the internet. There was a time before social media.
What?
Where people didn't know things about other people. It was kept secrets. There's a lot of dead bodies buried out in the West from the cowboys that, nobody could trade. There was no cold case files, I mean, so people got away with a lot of things, and Colonel Parker was the vanguard of those people. He was raised in the Netherlands. He was not an American citizen. Of course, we know this now. His name was, and I'm going to murder this name, and I apologize in advance. His name was Andreas van Koo. I think that's the closest pronunciation I can come up with. And he had multiple brothers and sisters, and he fell in love with the carnival. So
wasn't he running away from a bad rep or record?
Not yet.
Oh.
He was a little boy, and he wanted to take on to the carnivals. So he used to care for the animals, and he worked his way up. He was running from some other things.
Yeah, I thought like he had done something in his own country, and that's why he came over here because
Right.
he was a bad boy.
Yeah, he certainly was. He's another guy who could work both sides of the law with equal skill. Um, so he ends up in the carnivals, working with the animals and tending to the animals, and he learned how to work his way right up to being a pitchman and a showman and promoting the shows and the acts and so forth. And that's where he learned the trade to promote musical acts. So he's working on the docks. He wants to come to America. Of course, back then, everyone, and you know what? They still do. So here he is. He's on the shipping docks, and he's stashing cash. And then the unthinkable happens. On May 17th, 1929, this woman, Anna Van Den Eden, and don't remember that name because it doesn't matter, she ended up murdered.
I wonder what she's a needin'.
She ended up murdered. She was a shopkeeper, a husband and wife, and that was the day. That was a very interesting thing. It was a very interesting thing. She got bludgeoned in the head so bad her brain was coming out her ear. Somebody really did her in. I mean, and with great intent. And no one could pick up the scent. They had the dogs over and they were trying to pick up the scent, but no one could because they had pepper all over everything. Whoever did this took black pepper and sprinkled it all over everything so the dogs would sneeze and go crazy. Now, only someone who had worked with animals and knew animals well would know this. So, May 17th, 1929 is the day that Andreas van Koos ceased to exist in the Netherlands. And 2 days later, this person who was to be named Tom Parker appeared in America. Are the two connected? Remains to be seen. I do know that, and there's a fantastic book out there. It's called, it was written by Alana Nash, and it's called The Colonel, and I cite it in my book because it's a fantastic work. And if you want to learn all about Colonel Parker, you can read that book. And it's not often that I promote another author's work, but it's just that good. It's a really good book. She goes into this in detail. So Colonel Parker appears in America, leaves all of his money he's been working for, everything behind. Stowaways on a ship, comes to America, goes into the Army. Because back then, if you were serving in the Army, you couldn't be prosecuted. So he goes into the Army. He ends up going AWOL. They catch him, bring him back, and they put him in solitary confinement for, a large amount of time. And when it's time to get him out of solitary confinement, he emerges with some variety of a mental illness. His speech is slurred. He's not talking right. He's not acting right. And he is basically a psychopath. This is what their determination was of this person. And I know people use that word a lot. He's a psychopath, she's a psychopath. But this guy really was a psychopath. So he gets discharged from the Army, and he takes the name of his commanding officer, Tom Parker. So he puts Colonel Tom Parker in front of it, just for the wow factor. So here we have this murdering stowaway who's a psychopath wandering the streets of America, and we know all of this now, but of course that then. And he has a tremendous history as a carnival barker of promoting big shows, so he knows how to do this. So somehow, and this is a little foggy in history, he ends up managing major acts here in America. Gene Austin, Minnie Pearl, Hank Snow, June Carter Cash, who ended up being Johnny Cash's wife, Roy Acuff. And he finally he works his way up through those people to Eddie Arnold, which was a huge star, who he deemed the king of country music, just like he deemed Elvis Presley the king of rock and roll. I mean, this all should sound familiar. This is the way he did things. And Eddie Arnold, they parted ways, and it wasn't good. It was supposed to be a 50-50 split, but Colonel Parker was doing promotions on the side, and Eddie Arnold wasn't getting a cut of it. He was selling buttons and shirts and crazy things.
Still today, that motherfucker. Sorry.
So they had a confrontation, and Eddie Arnold let him have it, and that was it. They split, and it wasn't good. So now he's got to find his new gig. In comes the 1956 Elvis Presley, who's just about 3 steps away from being gigantic. So all of these stars who I just mentioned were being billed in Las Vegas. Colonel Parker had the Vegas pull to get these people booked in their hotels. And of course, as we all know, you don't play Vegas anywhere, especially in that time, unless you're dealing with the mob. The mob ran Vegas, and it's a fact. Look it up. They owned all those venues that these stars were playing at. So Colonel Parker, over the years, developed a very long and trusting and great working relationship with a lot of mob figures. As a matter of fact, there's a picture in my book of Elvis Presley on the set of GI Blues, and you've seen the picture. And
oh yeah,
everybody's smiling off set except Elvis. Elvis is positively miserable. And who's funding the picture? One of Colonel Parker's mobster buddies, a fellow named Mo Dalitz. Mo Dalitz in the 50s and 60s, there was no one bigger in Las Vegas. I mean, he was part of the Cleveland Syndicate, and he owned the Desert Inn and the Stardust.
Well, before he even got to Vegas, like, didn't the government lose their ever-loving minds because of the shifty hips and the sexiness and everyone losing their minds and them losing control over, the people of their government? So they're like, hey, we got to put this guy into the military and, send him out.
Sure, that's absolutely what happened, and they did it later with Muhammad Ali. Anybody who really goes against, anybody who can really rile the people up gets taken out of society. Either you get murdered or you go off to military. That's what they did with Elvis Presley. So here we have, this is how Elvis Presley, Colonel Parker, and the Las Vegas thing happened. There were 2 main people for Las Vegas that Elvis Presley, or that Colonel Parker used to book Elvis Presley. Mo Dalitz, who is an interesting figure. Like I said, he came out of the Cleveland mob, and they opened the Stardust and the Desert Inn on money that they earned running liquor during Prohibition. The front, he was really out there to be a closer ally to Meyer Lansky and Jimmy Hoffa. So he was one of the people who actually helped make Frank Sinatra in his career. So it's a very tight-knit little group here. He actually became neighbors with Colonel Parker in Palm Springs later on when Elvis was doing movies, because the mob was bankrolling the movies. There's a lot going on here, a lot of working parts, all covered in the book. I'll tell you, we should probably break here. If you want the book in hard copy, go to my website, whomurderedbooks.com. whomurderedbooks.com, and if you buy a couple of books, you'll get the next one at 25% off. If you wanted there you go. If you wanted an ebook or audiobook, it's all the way around the world. I don't believe there's a Kindle version out as well. Get the book; it'll cover everything that I'm talking about and more, because I can only do so much here. So in comes another mobster named Milton Prell. Milton Prell was huge, absolutely huge in Vegas. He was the first person in Vegas to put bookie and race wire money for the Detroit Syndicate to work. And he owned the Bingo Club in 1947, which became the Sahara in 1952. I actually lived in Las Vegas for a time, and I worked security at the Sahara. Kind of interesting. He ended up buying the Aladdin and the Mint downtown Vegas. These are real powerful guys. They snap their fingers, they get anything they want. You're not playing Vegas, in those days unless you're playing with a mob, and Colonel Parker was.
Yeah.
So
He was really good at that.
this guy was really something. The mob had such a stranglehold on Elvis's life. This is what Eddie Arnold warned Elvis about. He said, don't sign anything with this guy. And he told Vernon, Elvis's father, he said, stay away from this guy. He's no good. And, you know, he told him all the horror stories, and he said, he's going to do this, he's going to do this, he's going to do this. And, you know, they listened to him and they believed him. But they were so Elvis was dirt poor. And, you know, when you stick your hand in your pocket and all you feel is your leg, kind of hard not to listen to somebody who's offering you all kinds of money. So they took it under advisement, and they signed with him, and here we go. It's another repeat. So this is how the backdrop is forming, and the mob had such a handle on Elvis Presley's life. He was in a velvet jail. He could do nothing without them. And even when he got married, he marries Priscilla. He flies to Vegas in Frank Sinatra's jet. Where do they get married? Milton Prell's hotel. I mean, they came really, really close to taking over this guy's world, everything. There was a time when the mob ran everything. And I actually believe it now they don't. The government runs everything. I actually think that when the mob ran everything, it was run better. They were smart enough not to kill the golden goose. The government doesn't care.
Yeah, you know? They could care less.
Yeah, so this is the backdrop. All of this is going on. So Elvis is making the government very nervous. Okay. And the government and they're very good, and this is not tinfoil hat talk. This is real talk. You can look this up. They're very, very good at playing dirty tricks. They will plant things. They will infiltrate mobs and cause trouble and blame it on people. Martin Luther King comes to mind. I'll give you a little segue here. This is part of what the government does for dirty tricks. My friend Mark Lane, who of JFK fame, he was the one who wrote Rush to Judgment and started the JFK Assassination Research Group. He was an attorney. He also represented the fellow who was charged with the murder of Martin Luther King, James Earl Ray. And the government hated Martin Luther King. They would shake hands with him. They were nice to him in public. But behind the scenes, he was doing peaceful sit-ins, and he was shutting down entire cities. And these mayors, they were pulling their hair out. What do we do with this guy? Can't arrest him. He's not breaking any laws. It's peaceful. What do we do? Well, what they had them do was they had FBI agents infiltrate his mob and create violence to turn the tone of people against him so they could take him out. All right. Now, with Elvis Presley, the FBI was going crazy with Elvis because they were getting all kinds of complaints about the devil music and his, eroding the erosion of morals in the country and wiggling his legs and everything.
Oh, no.
Yeah. Imagine. So, and then Elvis Presley started getting death threats. So now the same FBI who was called on to investigate him and was called on to protect him. This is really a crazy backdrop. I mean, I can't imagine what being Elvis Presley must have been like, especially during those years. So they came up with the plan. Look, the kid's really not bothering anybody. All he's doing is singing, and people are going crazy. You know, we don't have to do anything with this guy. Let's just draft him in the Army and get it over with. You know, everybody will calm down. He'll go away. When he comes out, you know, maybe he will have grown up. Fairly simple, happened to work. They did the exact same thing with Muhammad Ali. You know, Muhammad Ali went through his social struggles, you know, with the Nation of Islam, and miraculously, guess what? He gets drafted in the army. You know, this is what they did when they wanted to remove people subtly from society if they were creating an issue. And Elvis, I think, was the first person they did that to. Elvis was first in a lot of things. I think I can say this without fear of arguments. Before anybody did anything, Elvis Presley did everything. I mean, this guy, the things that he went through, the things that he did, he was first in everything. You know, it's amazing. So all of this is going on. We have a lunatic manager managing probably the greatest musical talent on the planet ever. And we have the mob involved with this lunatic. All of these people are strangling Elvis. Elvis has no freedom. And there becomes a tipping point. Elvis has had it. He's had enough. And the star power, if you weren't alive at this time, you would not have any idea the star power this guy had. In a time when there were no fax machines, no internet, no social media, nothing, there's like 3 TV stations. You go halfway around the world, in a grass hut where people don't even have running water, they got a little picture of Elvis in there.
Right?
It's mind-blowing. I mean, I don't know if you remember the story about the Chilean miners who were stuck. There's like 30 Chilean miners that were stuck in the mines.
That was sad.
They were singing Elvis Presley songs. They would speak English. They're singing Elvis Presley songs. You know, so he is so baked in the cake of all of this, and to think that this guy was under mob control was just incredible. So he was a big money maker. He was a big quote-unquote earner for the mob. They had their hands in a couple pies. They had their fingers in a couple pies where they didn't belong. And I'll say this, and then I'll come back. Remind me, let's bookmark that. The Recording Industry Artists of America said that Elvis Presley had sold 6 billion records. Billion. Billion. They started tallying that after Elvis's biggest years. They really don't know how many records Elvis Presley sold. So now you calculate this out. Okay, I know he was generous. I know he gave away Cadillacs and a house, actually, to somebody that I know. Elvis dies. He's got $1 million in the bank. Where's all the money?
With the mob. And the casinos.
I don't know, you know, I might actually, if I really want to drive myself insane, I might write another book on that someday, but it won't be anytime soon. There had to have been a long-standing blackmail somewhere.
Well, I don't even, let me clear my throat. I don't even think that had to do with Elvis. I think it had to do with this asshat's fucking gambling issues and his debts that he repeatedly built up. Had he not been in charge of Elvis, and Elvis was allowed to actually go out and tour and sell his music, he would have written so much more music, instead of repeatedly acting in these stupid little fucking shows and having to sit there and replay and re-sing the same old songs. He was so muted as far as his artistic ability and the things that he could have done. Like the freaking universe was the limit, and this guy's head was freaking cut off. It's just so sad and ridiculous.
From your mouth to God's ears. Elvis Presley was receiving millions and millions of dollars of offers to perform at the pyramids at Giza. Had to be turned down. Why? Colonel Parker wasn't an American citizen. He couldn't get a passport. So he kept Elvis back. Elvis was offered the starring role in A Star Is Born with Barbra Streisand, the original. I think there's another one out now, but Colonel Parker put the kibosh on it. He wanted to keep Elvis in his place. Why? Here's why. The mob is very good at finding what you have under your nails, quote unquote. They'll check you out. They'll dig into your past. They dug into Colonel Parker's past and they found out what he did.
Well, yeah, and Colonel Asshat had a gambling problem.
And they started to squeeze him. The more the mob squeezed him on the blackmail or the murder, the more Colonel Parker had to squeeze his moneymaker. He couldn't let Elvis Presley go or expand because he would get away from him. Colonel Parker didn't know anything about the movie business. He didn't know anything about that. So he had to keep him back. He had to keep him in his place. Where RCA and a couple other people who were basically working for Colonel Parker and Colonel Parker were working for them. Colonel Parker wasn't working for Elvis, especially if you look at some of the business deals that he did that, quote unquote, were for Elvis. They were grossly unfair to Elvis.
Yeah, Elvis didn't get a major cut of all this stuff.
It's really something else. So Elvis has had enough. He can't go anywhere. He can't do anything. They got a stranglehold on this guy. And now they got him into these movies, and he's about pulling his hair out. And I'm not going to mention the fellow's name. He didn't give me permission to, but I know somebody was in the room, one of his Memphis Mafia, who he asked me not to mention his name, so I won't. He was in the room when this happened. They were going over the next script. And Elvis is flipping through it. And if you've ever seen a script for a movie, it's thousands and thousands of pages. So, and they were shooting these films in 30 days. Which brings me to Body Doubles. Remind me, I will come back to Body Doubles.
We'll come back on the next hour on that.
So, Elvis was looking this script over, and he's furious. He's furious, and he takes the script and he goes, you know what? Last movie I was a speedboat racer. The movie before I was a motorcycle racer. He said it's the exact same script. I'm not doing it. And he gets pissed off and he throws the script up in the air. And it's all over the room. I pity whoever had to pick this up. And he said, I'm not doing it. I'm not doing it. That's it. I've had it. Saying the next morning they were supposed to start shooting. He didn't go. He said, I've had enough of this. Well, the next morning, RCA came up, Colonel Parker came up, a couple other people came up who were involved in management, and it was put to Elvis in a blunt fashion, you're going to do this or you're not going to do anything else. And I think that we would be naive at this point to think that they were threatening his career. Elvis has a problem.
Yeah.
And he knows what the problem is, and he can't get away.
Mm-mm.
So then Colonel Parker, after everybody dissipates, Colonel Parker and this other man in the room, Elvis hears this from the Colonel. He said, we started out as a 25-75 split. I'm taking 25%, and you're paying the expenses. That was the original deal. He said, since I'm going to do all this extra work for you, I'm taking it to a 50-50 split. I'm going to backdate it from the beginning of the year.
And you're still going to pay for everything.
And you're still going to pay the expenses. And Elvis had to go along with it. What could he do?
Fire him. But I mean, he had him under his nail or under his thumb, you know. He didn't know how to get out.
He was stuck. He was stuck. So here we have the greatest entertainer in the world, and he's being manipulated and held in his place with these ridiculous beachy movies. And
he hated it so bad, and it kept him from his music. Like, he's stuck in these little B-rate freaking movies. How many do they make per month? Every freaking month. It's like, when is it ever going to end? When is he going to be an artist again? You know, they were just totally going off of his beautiful face and his gyrating hips and whatever else, and keeping him in this rut of B-rate movies. Like you said before, a racer, race car driver, race boat driver, race bike driver, same old crap.
It was brutal. I mean, I can't even imagine. At one point, I mean, it got to the point where, I mean, they're cranking out a movie in 30 days. I mean, think about this.
Yeah, that's insane.
It got to the point where Elvis was so depleted of sleep and so run down, he got a bloody nose one time that wouldn't stop. And they had to call the doctor, and they basically said, you're working this man to death. His resistance is gone.
Well, yeah.
You got to give this guy a couple days off.
Not just that, like they're giving him uppers and then downers trying to get him to sleep. Like they're giving him every freaking cocktail in the freaking universe and expecting him to live through it.
Elvis Presley was the most abused human being in, you know what it was? It was entertainment servitude. And it just breaks your heart. I mean, it's to think that, and this was years before the Betty Ford Clinic.
Right.
Years before anybody knew about prescription drugs. I mean, we're a naive country at this point. This is 1966, 68,
Yeah, these things are normal. They're even giving them, oh man, what is her name? Shirley Temple. Here, Shirley Temple. Take all these things for these shows you're doing and stuff like that. It's good for you. These are nice little actor vitamins.
Yeah, really. So this was commonplace, but I don't think it was as prevalent as it was with Elvis. So back to body doubles. They realize Elvis, they're working the guy to death.
Okay, before we go to body doubles, we do have to go to our music break, okay? And then when we get back, we'll go on to body doubles.
Sounds great.
Awesome. So on this break, we have Miss Michaelan Hay from Ontario, Canada, and she's going to be singing Close, as well as Collapse, Devil You Know, and Nothing But Blood. And then we have Mr. Fred Johnson III from Canyon County, California, with Sugar. You guys don't go anywhere. We'll be right back after this musical break.
Saw you for the first time in a while. You seemed so surprised. I worked out a smile. 'Cause I've grown and I've changed. Yeah, we went separate ways. How come we're both back here? 'Cause you pushed me away, had my life rearranged, but still we're both back here. Close to me, I want you close to me. I can see that you want me. Follow me, baby, just follow me. Better the devil, you know. 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 There's too much sky, too blue, too white. The birds on the wire are singing, but I don't know why. Why aren't the roses hanging their heads? They're standing straight up, blooming instead. Now that we're apart, there's nothing but blood in my heart. Why does that guy have a smile on his face? Why is the sun even shining today? Why are the headlines talking about love? Don't they all know what happened to us? Now that we're apart, there's nothing but blood in my heart. The moon goes up, the sun goes down, the stars light up, the world goes round. Every day, life moves on, it don't stop for anyone. The moon goes up, the sun goes down, the stars light up, the world goes round. Every day, life moves on, it don't stop for anyone. Now that we're apart, there's nothing. Now that we're apart, there's nothing but blood in my heart. Ooh, blood in my heart. Ooh, blood in my heart.
Waiting here on this coast.
without you. Where did our love go wrong, my sugar?
Welcome back, and thank you so much for joining us this evening on We Are Paradox Media's Late Night in the Rockies. I'm your host, TessaTNT, and I'm so grateful to have you guys on tonight. We have the wonderful and talented Mr. Stephen B Ubaney, who has written the Who Murdered series. We have Who Murdered Diana, Who Murdered FDR, and Who Murdered Elvis, and then we also had a 5-year anniversary on the Elvis book. Welcome back, Stephen, and thank you so much for coming on and discussing Elvis with us this evening on his birthday.
Happy birthday, Elvis. Yeah, it's a pleasure to be on. It really is. I always have a good time on your show.
I'm glad.
So when last we spoke, we were talking about body doubles.
Send in the clones!
Okay, so this is where a lot of the Elvis is Alive things come from, and I have to talk about this, and then we'll talk about what everybody wants to talk about. We're going to talk about the murder and all of it, okay? Elvis was being worked to death with these movies. I mean, probably quite literally. He just simply couldn't go on anymore. They had to force them to give him a couple days off because he was having nosebleeds and other issues. And the doctor came and examined him, and they just said that he was just exhausted to the point where his body had no resistance left. They were literally working this guy to death. So they came up with the idea. I don't exactly know who, but pardon me. They had some body doubles that could stand in for Elvis. And these are guys who kind of look like Elvis anyway. But they went and they got surgically altered to look even a little more like Elvis, to the point where they would pass in a crowd for this guy. They were approximately the same height, about the same build. And I learned about this from a couple of the people within Elvis's circle, who I ended up meeting and knowing. Of course, they're gone now because we're at that time in history. Generations change. I also became really good friends with one of his co-stars, Susanna Lee, who was his co-star in Paradise Hawaiian Style. She told me that the first 4 scenes that she shot weren't even with Elvis. They were with this body double. They had 2 body doubles, one named Matt and one named John. And they looked pretty darn close. You really had to know it wasn't him. So Elvis was in the studio laying down the soundtracks for the movie, and she hadn't met Elvis yet, and she was terrified because she had done movies with other stars, and they were actually quite mean to her. And of course, Elvis was not that way. He was very nice to her. So she was all nervous. She had met these other guys, and they were shooting scenes and these body doubles and stand-ins and all that. And one of them dove off the cliffs, and fun in Acapulco, Elvis was not diving off the cliffs. So these people are legitimate, As a matter of fact, she told me something that absolutely blew my mind, and I'll pass it on to you. If you look at, in the press kit of Paradise Hawaiian Style, Susanna Lee has her arms around Elvis Presley's neck, and they're both posing looking at the camera. Mm-hmm. And that person is not Elvis.
Oh.
And I just said, so wait a minute, what? Back up? She said, no, this is not Elvis. This is a guy named Matt. And she said, you can tell if you look at his face, because Elvis had a very triangular face, and this guy's face is very U-shaped. He had a little more jowls. His face was a little thicker. And I had to really look at it. And I said, Susanna, you're right. This isn't Elvis. So that's how good these people were. And this is where this Elvis is Alive thing is coming from. These people are about Elvis's age. They've now gone on with their lives, and these are who these people are seeing when they're taking pictures. And Elvis seems to have become our new Bigfoot. They have pictures of him walking. Come on, it's insane.
Yeah, there was even an old guy out there like singing to the, small masses trying to be white-haired old Elvis still alive. That ain't Elvis.
No, it really isn't. And you know what? I was in that Elvis is Alive camp, and I don't make fun of these people, and I don't want you guys to either. I always be nice to them because they are finding evidence. They are finding evidence. And I was in this camp for a long, long time until I learned the rest of the story. The evidence that they're finding has been planted for them to find. Because the more time they spend on all of this evidence that they're finding, 2 death certificates were filed, all of this stuff that they're finding has been planted, most likely by government operatives, for them to find. Because the more time we spend looking for Elvis alive at Burger King, the less time we spent trying to solve a cold case murder.
Right.
The murderer is still out there, but we're not looking for him.
The more people are going to be buying buttons and posters and all these other things that Colonel Asshat is still selling.
Well, yeah. Right after Colonel Parker died, I noticed that there was a great decrease in the sightings of Elvis.
Right.
So I just had to mention that. There's these body doubles they're for real. I think one of them's passed on now. One of them is still alive. And these guys look enough like Elvis where it would stop you in your tracks if you saw him. As a matter of fact, now Susanna Lee's passed on now. She died in 2016, lost a brutal bout with liver cancer.
Oh, no.
What a sweetheart, too. A really nice girl. What a sweetheart. She told me a lot about old Hollywood. A lot of very interesting stories came down. Couple interesting stories about a couple of the Memphis Mafia, which were later verified when I actually ended up meeting them. Okay, let's talk about Elvis being murdered.
We're going to jump straight to there.
There's a segue and a half, isn't it? So there gets to a point where the mob is all over Elvis, and he can't get him off, and he's starting to rebel. He's losing control of his life, all right? They're just dominating everything. Colonel Parker tried really hard to split Elvis and Priscilla.
Oh, yeah. Even after they got married, it was like, okay, you're married. Get the hell away from her. Get back to doing all this other stuff. He didn't allow any time for honeymoon or anything like that. Nothing.
No, Colonel Parker wanted Elvis to be single because it was more marketable. He didn't want Elvis to be married because he couldn't be this sex symbol beefcake guy if he had a wife and a kid.
When has that ever stopped a fella?
Yeah, well, that's kind of true. So after they get married, he plunges Elvis right into another elongated project. It was called the Singer Special. We know it as the Black Leather-Clad Comeback Special. They never had a honeymoon. You have to kind of feel sorry for Priscilla a little, just a little, because they never got it. In today's world, what they would do is take 2-3 years off. They were not afforded that. Elvis needed to. He was the dancing monkey. He had to make the money so Colonel Parker could get the money, so Colonel Parker could pay the mob because he was being squeezed. So Elvis decides he's going to rebel. He's had it. He's had enough. So he does the unthinkable. He goes to see Nixon. This is just mind-boggling. Elvis didn't like the way the country was going. He didn't like the hippie element. He didn't like the fact that just everything was going on in the country. It was the radical 60s, and of course the early 70s were not all that much better with all kinds of things that were going on. So Elvis goes to see Nixon. And Elvis is starting to get threats, serious threats. 1969, somebody gives a letter to Elvis saying that they're going to shoot him on stage. So Elvis is now on stage with guns on his ankle. Those bell bottoms held. They hit an awful lot. So. This was a serious thing. So he starts to realize as entertainers do. They travel around. He said, hey, I'm traveling to all these states. I need to be certified to carry guns in all of these states in case something really happens. I need to be armed. I need the right permission to do this.
They're like, we don't know you're carrying a deadly weapon there on your hips.
Yeah. So he goes to see Nixon, and he wants to be a federal narcotics officer because there's all of this drug culture going on. And he's playing now in 2 months in Las Vegas at the International Hotel, which later became the Las Vegas Hilton. And he's there 2 months, and he's doing 2-3 shows a night. An hour and 15 minutes, 7 days a week, which is, like I said, entertainment servitude. And he's banging down $125,000 a week. At a time when people are making $5,000 a year. That's pretty damn good money. It's pretty damn good money for today. But he's starting to notice everything's changing. The kids are on drugs. The country's starting to unravel.
Well, it kind of makes me wonder, though, because, didn't he have, little M&Ms or Skittles or whatever sort of bowl you want to call it, full of different, opiates and whatever for his buddies? He really didn't partake of these things, but he had a bunch of different friends that did. And so he had different things going on in this bowl, but was it maybe he saw certain of his friends going off the rails with certain sort of drugs that really perturbed him? Or how did he get on this different scale? Because it's kind of like the pot calling the kettle black to me, because he did have this, candy bowl full of drugs for his friends, the mafia, whatever, whoever you want to call them. And he's upset about the fact that there's drugs going on too within his fan base. I'm kind of confused when it comes down to that stuff.
Well, I'll get back to that. You're right, okay, but I'll explain that. Okay. They were prescription drugs. They were not street drugs. Okay, I'll go over this real quick.
Okay.
1975, 76, Elvis Presley almost went bankrupt, and he was the biggest taxpayer in the state of Tennessee, and his father had to take over all of his finances to keep him afloat. So Vernon cramped down so hard on the spending that Elvis's doctor was traveling with him, and he didn't want all of these. Elvis's Memphis Mafia, they were all taking drugs. They were all taking uppers and downers and whatever. And Dr. Nicopolis could write. So Elvis said, look, just write it all under my name, and everybody can just take what they want, because I don't want to answer to my dad about it.
Yeah.
So what he was prescribed and what he was actually taking were entirely two different things.
Right.
So back to Nixon. So he wants to carry guns, and for lots of reasons Elvis talked to Nixon. It was the protection that he wanted. He did not like the hippie element that was going on.
Well, I think he was feeling threatened as far as the mafia as well. He kind of got a glimpse into what was going on behind the scenes as far as what's going on with his life and where he should be as stardom and what's muting him, which is the mafia and all this other crap. Maybe he's trying to stop it in a certain extent.
He wanted some traction against him for sure. So Nixon gives him the badge, and it was supposed to be kept quiet. He said, look, I can work for you and I can feed you information, but it's got to be kept quiet. Well, somebody in the White House leaked it, and it came out in the newspaper that Elvis got a narcotics badge.
What a jerk.
Blew everything out of proportion, everything that Elvis was working for to keep quiet. In the pictures in my book, there's lots of cool pictures in the book. I don't need the book sales. If you buy a book, great. If you don't, great. But I really would like people to go out and get this information just so it's out there, so we can give the guy the credit.
Yeah, and you really should buy the book and read it, because, we are covering a lot of stuff, but it doesn't cover everything. And there's a lot of details in there. Like I said, Stephen spent a lot of time investigating all the backgrounds on these books, over, I'm going to say 5,000 hours per book.
It was 10 years on the Elvis book.
Yeah, it's so many freaking hours in there us talking about it is one thing, but to buy the book and read it is a totally another. And like I said, it's so awesome and easy to get into. Like, I loved it. There's some writers I'm like, oh God, it's like so hard to read this book. But when it comes to your writing, I really enjoy it, and I really can fly through it, and it's really a good experience. I feel like I'm there and I'm investigating with you and figuring all this stuff out.
Well, thank you. That's nice to hear. Elvis is having problems. He needs traction against the mob, and he thinks the FBI is the right way to go about it. So not only is he being threatened on stage, he needs traction against the mob. He's trying to get away from Colonel Parker and the mob and do a couple of things. So he gets this narcotics badge, and now he's already playing in Vegas 2 months a year. All of a sudden, all these people start getting busted. And it's working. He's taken down some people, all right? So what the FBI asked of Elvis was something that shocked me. They asked him to pose FBI agents as musicians and backup singers in his band. Not all the time, but just on some they rotate in and out. Their job was to take down the Vegas mob.
Yeah, that surprised me.
Yeah, and I know the movie Casino was fictitious, but it's based on a true story. I mean, the mob ran everything. They had all the hotels bugged. They had everything bugged, and the mob and the FBI leaked like a sieve back then, and they probably still do. Hell, who knows? But everybody was busted. The mob knew what Elvis was up to. They knew what all the FBI people were up to. They just couldn't have been more caught. So the threats against Elvis now, they continue. It's really, really bad. They're ramping up now. It's 1973. And, I just wanted to come back to Elvis posing FBI agents in his band. I did not come up with that. I was lucky in a sense that there were other researchers who delved into this before I came into it.
I think the only people that would notice are like hardcore fans that would follow Elvis everywhere, and they're like, hey, who's that new band member or whatever, you know? Otherwise, you don't even know what's going on.
Probably so. Maria Columbus was the investigator that broke that story, and she broke it way back in 1990. She was walking through Graceland, and she went up to the trophy room. And if you've never been to Graceland, it's worthwhile. You have to realize, though, when you go, that it's been dwarfed by time. It was 1977. So, I mean, it's been dwarfed by time, just like everything does eventually. She's walking into the trophy room, and she sees a letter on the wall from the United States government thanking Elvis for participation in something. I can't remember. It's in the book. But so she sees this letter, and she's so curious. So she writes a letter to the federal government wanting to know what this was about. The federal government replied to her and told her the story. Very interesting stuff. There's a lot going on about this guy that is just now coming out. Because you have to remember, Elvis Presley, he's surrounded by this group of guys, the quote-unquote Memphis Mafia, his entourage, and nothing is getting out from Elvis. Nothing's getting into Elvis. He is really held in his own little universe. The only time he ever has any contact with the outside world is if he's watching Match Game or one of the 70s game shows. The guy's up all night, he sleeps all day. As a lot of entertainers do, for privacy and some other things. Elvis was just a huge insomniac. So the plot thickens to the point where in 1973, right after Aloha from Hawaii, he's on stage and 4 guys rush him on stage.
What the hell?
They're going to take him out. I mean, this is really, it's getting substantial. Well, Elvis is way over on the left-hand side of the stage, and he's singing. He doesn't see these guys. Jerry Schilling, Lamar Fike, Red West, they're part of his security group at the time. They see him, and they take him out. One of them gets to Elvis, and Elvis shows him why he was a very high-ranking black belt.
Black belt, eh? Yeah.
This is substantial. I mean, all of the Memphis Mafia they got full-blown martial arts. Bars went up on Graceland. They're down now, but look on Google. Bars were up on Graceland for a reason. Elvis was in threat of his life. So all of this is going on. He's gathering evidence against the mob. All right. And he's filtering the evidence back to the federal government. Not a good idea when the mob is your cash cow. You're in a mob-run casino. Your manager is in the mob. Your manager is downstairs gambling like a crazy person. When Elvis died, it was determined that Colonel Parker, his manager, owed $32 million in back gambling debts. All of this is not going to, you put this in a jar and shake it up, this has just got to explode. And of course it did. So but the plot thickens further between the mob and the FBI and how Elvis got smashed in the middle of it. As I said earlier, Elvis Presley was going bankrupt, and they had to liquidate a few things to keep him afloat.
And that's how a lot of the Memphis Mafia fell apart as well, because it wasn't Elvis's fault. It was because he put it in the hands of his father, Vernon, and he ruffled some feathers not quite the right way.
Yeah, Elvis's father let a couple bodyguards go. A couple of them they knew pretty well. Eventually, of course, they're all gone now too. I think only Dave Hebler is left, and I don't know Dave. We certainly chewed some of the same dirt, and maybe I'll get a chance to talk to him one of these days.
So.
I hope I do. So, Elvis has two planes. One is this first plane, the Hound Dog 2, which is a $900,000 plane. It's in dry dock, right? So he's moved on to bigger and better things, as Elvis always did. Now he's got the Lisa Marie, which is a much bigger, much more palatial jet or plane, much different than the Hound Dog 2. So he's using the Lisa Marie. He's not using the littler plane. So Vernon says, "Well, why are we paying dry dock? Let's just get rid of that plane." And Elvis said, "Yeah, go ahead. I'm not using it." So they offered for sale, and a fella buys it. His name is Frederick Peter Pro. And he, talk about bad luck. This guy is running an international, he's another organized crime member from another organized crime group who has been going around internationally and doing scams. What he told Vernon was this: look, I'll buy your plane, but it needs updating for the codes. It needs to be updated. Do this. You borrow more money against the plane.
I heard that one. That was ridiculous. I'd be like, no, sorry, we'll find somebody else to buy it, but yeah.
I'll pay you in installments.
Oh, no.
And then I'll pay more than you're actually asking. So the plane disappeared. He gave him possession of the plane. No money came in. He stole a $900,000 jet from Elvis Presley. So now here's Elvis now. He's buddies with the FBI. So now he's going to go after the guy who stole his plane, who's also an organized crime member. So Elvis just got in the middle of all of this crunching. You talk about being in the middle between a rock and a hard place, and here's Elvis Presley. So Elvis Presley dies very mysteriously just a few days before he was going to turn state's evidence against the mob. Very bizarre circumstances. So I ended up...
Weird.
When I dig, I really dig, And I ended up talking to a fella who's also gone now. It's unbelievable. These people are just dropping like flies.
I know, weren't you on the way to interview a particular individual, and all of a sudden you discover he's no longer there? He died?
Dan Warlick.
Jesus.
Dan Warlick was, he was the Jerry Francisco's investigator, he was the medical examiner's investigator in Shelby County, and he went on to be an attorney. And when I started to investigate this and really dig, I just looked him up and called him. Really a nice man. They call it Southern charm. Whatever it is, he had it in spades.
Yeah.
He was just a really nice man. And I talked to him on the phone once, met him, I think, 3 times. And he told me what he found. He was the one who investigated the death scene. And they find Elvis on the floor, as legend and lore is told. He fell off the toilet, and they raced him to the hospital, and they pronounced him dead. And they stick a camera in Joe Esposito's face, who was Elvis's road manager, who told everybody that he was dead in bed.
Mm-hmm.
So Jerry Francisco, Lieutenant McCochran, district attorney, assistant district attorney, they go, Jerry Stauffer, that's what the man's name was, they go to Graceland. They're starting to investigate, and they notice that everything has been sanitized. Everything's been cleaned up. This death scene has been cleaned up. How can this possibly be?
It's insane. It's mind-blowing, and it's like, okay, maybe Juanita and Pearl or whoever the fuck came in there to clean up like they do every day. They didn't know any better. Give me a freaking break. There should be some sort of officers on point or whatever that are saying, you cannot come in here. This is a crime scene, or we need to investigate this scene. There's no cleanup, blah, blah, blah. Nope, they're coming in there, they're cleaning up, and there's a reason for it.
Yeah, well, the place, the crime scene was, look, Elvis knew the Shelby County sheriffs really well. He knew the Memphis police really well. When he flew from city to city, he had a chance to know almost all of the officers in the cities that he went to, because they used to help him with security. He used to pay him extra money just to help him with crowd control and so forth, because his guys could only do so much. So he was really friendly with a lot of law enforcement, including his hometown. So here's this death scene under police lockdown. What the hell's going on? How does this thing end up sanitized? So the EMTs...
Not just the bathroom, but the freaking bed.
Yeah, the EMTs, Ulysses Jones and Charles Crosby, again, both dead. Charles Crosby under very mysterious circumstances, too, which I won't get into because we have time constraints here, and I want to make sure I cover the evidence of the murder that I uncovered. They get there, and there's evidence of a struggle. This place is a mess. So they go down, and they tell... they're telling the doctors, hey, look, there's something wrong here. And they're thinking that he OD'd. So obviously Dan Warlick was dispatched to go get evidence. They found a bunch of syringes. There were 2 syringes that were found, but they were not the type of syringe that you would find in your doctor's office. They were like skeleton, almost like a mini caulking gun, where you would put your tube in.
Pre-sippers.
And there was no needle in it. And they're going to Elvis's office, and it's right in plain sight. You can't miss it. Again, more planted evidence, just like what the Elvis alive people are finding.
Well, it wasn't even just in the bathroom. Wasn't it like on a bookshelf in another room, and over here in another room? And
yeah, one was in his office, and then they turn to the right, and they go to Elvis's bedroom, and one is on the Anwar right in front of them. And it was then when they looked at the bed, and they realized the bed was made, and Dan Warlick loses his mind because he knows right then and there, I can't get any evidence here. Everything's been cleaned up. So he turns and goes into the bathroom. The place is spotless. There's a black leather doctor's bag on the counter. There's not even a baby aspirin in this thing. Nothing. There's nothing in it. Everything has been sanitized.
And was that the EMT bag, or that was Elvis's?
That was Dr. Nick's bag. And the story of Elvis's death keeps changing. First it was a heart attack, and of course that was like, Grimm's fairy tales. And then it was suicide. They said that, Elvis just saved all of his drugs and just took them at once.
Nope.
It's a great story. It's not true. Elvis Presley had a nurse living on the grounds named Tish.
I don't think it's that great.
Yeah. who Tish Henley was the one who was in charge of keeping Elvis's drugs and dispatching them and giving them to him. You know, also Marion Cock, one of Elvis's other nurses. You know, she was frequently there, and she would bring medicine. Elvis never had control of his medicine.
No, so, like why does he want to worry about that, or his finances, or all this other crap? He's got different people that have different jobs and do different things, just like the chef. He's not going to go in the kitchen and cook stuff unless he really wants to. Somebody else is going to do that.
Absolutely. So, you know, that story doesn't wash. So they're investigating this death scene, and I could go into an hour and a half of what my conversation with Dan Warlick. At first, he thought
we have an hour, so.
At first, he thought I was out of my mind because all he knew was what he saw on the table when he cut Elvis apart. He didn't know the backstory. Finally, I think about the last week or two of his life, he called me up and said, "You know, you're right. I read the book. You're right. Something else is going on here." Mm-hmm. So, anyway, Dan was about 6'2", maybe 6'3", he's just a little bit taller than me. And he laid down in front of the toilet, and he stretches himself out, and the wet spot that Elvis Presley allegedly regurgitated into the carpet was way away from the toilet.
Yeah, like, did he do a headlong...
It was almost 7 feet away.
Yeah, did he do a headlong run into the floor, or what the hell? Because this isn't just, I had a heart attack and fell off the toilet. This is, like, further away.
Elvis was never on the toilet. This is more legend than lore. When they did Elvis Presley's autopsy, they do this disgusting thing called running the gut, where they take out your intestines, and they take a flat-billed pair of scissors, and they cut up your intestine, and they open it up to see what's in it. Elvis Presley hadn't had a bowel movement in almost a month.
Yeah, and they messed that up, too.
Elvis had a real problem, and he was scheduled for surgery. Elvis had a twisted colon.
Okay, yeah, I was trying to remember what exactly was going on with him, but yeah, it was a twisted colon.
Are we going to be able to run over on this, or is it a hard hour?
Here in about, let's say, 10 minutes we'll go to break, and then we have about 50 minutes after that.
15?
50.
Oh, 50. Okay, so we can go longer. Okay.
Yeah.
So this whole thing is a mess. Nothing's making sense. Dan Warlick is in the middle of all of this, and he's trying to make sense of it. And he takes all of this information. He starts interviewing people. And he interviews Joe Esposito. Again, they interviewed him the first time at the hospital. Now they're interviewing him at Graceland. Now his story has changed. Elvis wasn't dead in bed. Now Elvis was found in front of the toilet. This has got to be one of the most magical corpses I've ever seen.
I know. It's immaculate.
What the hell is going on here, you know? So this guy is like trying to process all of this. And another thing he said is that Elvis had more guns and machine guns and weaponry than it absolutely blew his mind. He could have armed an army of people, which brings me to another point. If you look at Graceland, closed circuit TV, armed guards, gates, walls, bars on the windows, right? Mm-hmm. This isn't a house. This is a compound. Look at Michael Corleone's house in Godfather 2, and you show me the difference.
Right.
There ain't no difference. This is not just a place where Elvis lives and hangs out when he's not on tour. He's guarding
It's a freaking compound, and it wasn't always like that. But then at the very end it was, because he was afraid. He knew something was going to happen.
Absolutely. And you know what? I thought that I was the only one that knew Elvis was murdered. Finally, Dan Warlick came around after he read the book. Vernon Presley, Elvis's father, said right in front of the EMTs, "Oh my God, they've murdered my son." Mm-hmm. Which is a really interesting statement. It brings about two questions. How did they murder him, and who the hell is he talking about?
Who are they? Right.
And both of these questions are I figured this out in the book. Susanna Lee, of Co-Star fame, lived in Memphis. She was friends with Elvis. 1978, she makes the mistake, and she was coming out with another book before she died. And
Oh,
she
that
gave
was
it
a
to
good
me.
year, I have to say.
She gave.
That was the year I was born, so I just have to say that.
Susanna Lee was going to publish a book on Elvis's murder, and she gave it to me to edit, and she died in the middle of it. And I had to get a hold of her daughter, and I had to give it back. And I had to promise that I couldn't release what she was going to say, but the book would have been fantastic. She made the mistake in 1978 of going on Memphis television and saying, when are we going to solve the murder of Elvis Presley? And the outcry she got was just absolutely incredible. They ended up burning her house down. I mean, they sabotaged her car. She was a big dog lover. She had 6 or 7 dogs. Somebody jumped the wall in her condo and killed all of her dogs.
Oh my gosh.
She finally had to get out of Tennessee. She finally moved to Florida, which was, of course, the state that she died in. But, I mean, I learned a lot from Susanna Lee. And it was just such a shame that this book can't be published. And maybe someday her daughter will find her way to do it. And I told her I'd help her any way I can because there was some good information in there. Dr. Nicopolis, Elvis's doctor, Dr. Nick, and I had the occasion to speak with Dr. Nick. And, he was probably one of the most maligned people in history. I think Dr. Nick really cared for Elvis, and I think he got a bad rap.
Most people that are on the right side and they're doing the right thing, they'll twist it and make them look like they're on the wrong side and they're doing the wrong thing. So you'll believe, the freaking conspiracy theory over here instead of the real conspiracy on this end. Yep,
absolutely. Anybody who's watched any television news in the last 10 years knows exactly what we're talking about.
Right.
So, the loudest story is not always the truth. The truth usually comes in whispers. Anyway, so if you go to my website, whomurderedbooks.com, and you click on the link, there's a video, YouTube video of Dr. Nicopolis saying Elvis Presley was murdered and naming the murderer. And nobody talks about this. This is back in 1990. And I'm just blown away. Why isn't this solved? I mean, how many years do we have to go? What the hell's it going to take? How many people have to come forward and say, look, there's foul play here. His girlfriend at the time, Ginger Alden, she even said there's an interview out there, out on YouTube on her that says that she can't rule it out. I mean, pissed off a lot of people. Anybody who gets stuck in between the mob and the FBI is not going to be a happy ending. So they take Elvis to Baptist Memorial Hospital. The EMTs are trying to revive this corpse who is almost decomposed. They said the EMTs said that they thought he was a black guy. He was so decomposed. So they put him on this gurney and they take him down the front stairs.
That was the creepy part. Yeah, because even when they found him, they're like, there's some black guy in here. We need you guys come pick him up. No, that's Elvis, and he's been there for so freaking long that he looks black. Or it's weird because this has happened to another person that you've written about in your Who Murdered series, where they start to turn black. There's something in their system, not just time, something else that makes them turn this color, I think.
Very interesting stuff going on. So, Joe Esposito is an interesting guy. Another one who's no longer with us. Not my favorite guy. He's one of these people who always tells you the truth, but he'll tell you the truth 12 different ways. So the first time he said, he lied about where he found Elvis. First he was in bed and then he was on the floor. And then he said that there's so many videos out there of this guy just saying things in different capacities. He said that he found Elvis on the floor and he used the phone next to the commode to call 911 at a time when 911 didn't exist.
Right.
So if you can get past that, you get to the meat of it where Dr. Nicopolis was called. and they're loading Elvis into the ambulance, and Dr. Nikopoulos pulls up and hops in the back of the ambulance, and they're off. They're going to Baptist Memorial. And the entire time, Dr. Nikopoulos is trying to revive this corpse. Elvis has been dead for hours. And they're working
as a medical specialist, he should see by the color and the way the blood settles and everything. But, you got to try every effort in your little bag of tricks. Maybe something might work.
He told me, he said, I was baffled. He said, Elvis had just had 2 head-to-toe physicals, one for Lloyd's of London and one for another insurance company. He said, we'd done cardiograms, we'd done exercise bikes, we'd done everything. He said, I was in complete disbelief. How could this happen? So they get into Baptist Memorial, and all hell's breaking loose. Could you imagine the scene? The public is not there yet because they don't know what's going on. So they wheel him into a triage room, and they call for the Harvey team. Well, the Harvey team is Baptist Memorial's code for emergency medical team. I don't know what the significance of the name is. And you know what? 2 words. Don't care. They call it the Harvey team, okay?
Yeah, Harvey. That's it.
So they're calling the Harvey team over the hospital intercom. And lo and behold, Marion Koch, Elvis Presley's nurse, is on the Harvey team. So she comes to the aid. She has no idea who this is. She walks in and sees that she's floored. She was with Elvis the night before.
Yeah.
And she's witnessing all of this going on.
Was it because he was having issues sleeping, I think? She had to come over and give him some sleep help or whatever.
He needed some company before he wanted to hop on the plane.
Yeah, because his girlfriend sucked.
I won't touch that. But
she was a really good friend of him. Like, not only was she his nurse, but she was a really good friend of his. And I will say that. I will go out and say his girlfriend sucked at the time. Like, she was just into herself and whoever she's doing on the side. You have Elvis as a boyfriend. Like, what the fuck are you doing? But yeah, that was his nurse, and he's like, lonely. Hey, can you come over and spend some time with me? So they did spend time that evening.
They did. Yeah, Marion Koch, I believe, is still alive. And you know what? I've never spoken to her. Every time I go to Memphis, we tend to miss each other. We have mutual friends. I've never spoken to her, and I hope I do, because she was a really nice woman. She was very nice to Elvis. Elvis just absolutely loved her. Bought her a car. Bought her husband a car. I mean, there were some people around Elvis, not all. There were some people around Elvis who really, really cared about Elvis and not the image of Elvis.
Yeah.
There were a lot of hangers-on who didn't give a damn about the guy. But there were a few people who really, really cared about Elvis.
Yeah, there was dingleberries, but these guys actually were a part of his family.
For sure, yeah. So the Harvey team is in there, and they're trying to revive him by any means necessary. And Elvis had, bitten down on his tongue that was protruding, and they bashed his teeth down his throat, trying to get a tube in, trying to get oxygen in. They just did all kinds of heroic and horrific things. And finally, they said, this guy's long gone. They worked on him and worked on him. They said, this guy, Elvis has left the building, okay? So
when I heard about or read about the whole, they had to break his teeth to try to intubate him or whatnot, like, that to me was like, he was gone a long time ago. Like, you could have gone back there by the hinge of the jaw or whatever and try to pop it open that way. You have to break his teeth to try to intubate him. Like, they're trying really, really, really hard to get some stuff done. It's just mind-blowing to me how far they went.
It was a mess. So that's when Dan Warlick was dispatched to collect evidence, which he turns over to Jerry Francisco. And, of course, he finds no evidence. Why? Because the place is sanitized. How convenient. So he comes back with, as the EMTs are leaving, Jerry Francisco, the Assistant District Attorney Jerry Stauffer, Lieutenant McCochran, Officer Peel, and a man named I can't think of the fourth guy's name. It's immaterial. They're walking up the stairs as the EMTs are walking down. The EMTs get there and they know this place has been completely sanitized because the resuscitation equipment that they didn't need was left behind.
Yeah, they were there before. They saw the scene before. Then they came back and found their stuff up on the sink.
Everything had been collected and piled. So they looked at each other and they said, well, hey, it's Miller time. We got to go back on call. So they're going down the stairs as the investigators are coming up the stairs, and they tell them on the stairs, you're not going to find anything. This thing's been sanitized.
Well, on that note, I think that's a good place for us to break because we are a little late for our second music break. What do you think? Alrighty. So on this break, we once more have Miss Michaela Hay from Ontario, Canada. She's going to be singing Pins and Needles, Mirror, as well as Gravity. And then we have Fred Johnson the Toid from Canyon County, California with After Dark. You guys don't go anywhere. We'll be right back after this musical break.
Talking on pins and needles, every word through a microscope. You keep stomping down on the ground while I've been stuck on this tightrope. I just wanna say what I wanna say without your sentence. I'm not willing to do the time when I'm innocent, and I'm innocent. Talking on pins and needles. Talking on pins and needles. Your blowtorch at my feet. You won't ever see me beg, so take this tongue off your leash. I'm gonna say what I wanna say, don't need permission. Interpret it how you want, it's my decision. Talking on pins and needles. Talking on pins and needles. I'm gonna hang it up, hang it up, hang it up. And I'm done, and I'm done, and I'm done, done, done. I'm gonna hang it up, hang it up, hang it up. And I'm done, and I'm done, and I'm done, done, done. I'm gonna hang it up, hang it up, hang it up. And I'm done, and I'm done, and I'm done, done, done. I'm gonna hang it up, hang it up, hang it up. And I'm done, and I'm done, and I'm done, done, done. Dancing on shattered glass, kicking the pieces all around. My safety has been broken, this is now a hunting ground. Talking on pins and needles. Talking on pins and needles. I'm gonna hang it up, hang it up, hang it up. And I'm done, and I'm done, and I'm done, done, done. I'm gonna hang it up, hang it up, hang it up. And I'm done, and I'm done, and I'm done, done, done. I'm gonna hang it up, hang it up, hang it up. Hands upon my chest, I'll attest. I don't really wanna forget to forget you. Taught me how to turn a blind eye. I showed you how to keep a shoulder cold. No one walked away without a scar. I've been digging through the pieces. Your heart is out of reach, but objects may seem nearer through this rippled mirror. I've been digging through the pieces. Your heart is out of reach, but objects may seem nearer through this rippled mirror. You taught me how to turn a blind eye. I showed you how to keep a shoulder cold. No one walked away without a scar. I've been digging through the pieces. Your heart is out of reach, but objects may seem nearer through this rippled mirror. I've been digging through the pieces. Your heart is out of reach, but objects may seem nearer through this rippled mirror. Pull me closer, 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 pull me closer. Signs leave behind for you to find, hoping that you'll notice. Lights and purple skies were like satellites moving into focus. Into focus. Into focus. Silent, drifting all alone, killing time and counting stars, waiting for the moment we collide. I feel you pull me closer, you got me burning up, you got a hold on me. I feel you pull me closer, you got me burning up, you're my gravity. Shining in the dark, we chase the spark, search until we find it. We were worlds apart, now connecting hearts. They look up to find us. Look up to find us. Silent, drifting all alone, killing time and counting stars, waiting for the moment we collide. I feel you pull me closer, you got me burning up, you got a hold on me. I feel you pull me closer, you got me burning up, you're my gravity. Silent, drifting all alone, killing time and counting stars, waiting for the moment we collide. I feel you pull me closer, you got me burning up, you got a hold on me. perfect day, yeah. Living at the dark, I search lonely streets to find hidden shadows in the dark. It doesn't matter what I say. Secret homicides arranged in a series of pursuits. No matter what I say after dark, I gave her base because she had the range. I knew she was the one that never could go home again. Plastic life and limo seats, I don't know why I can't control this urge to hurt again, yeah. Living at the dark, I search lonely streets to find hidden shadows in the dark. It doesn't matter what I say. Chasing sinister, murder forever after. No matter what I say after dark. Feeling ran to arguments and fear. Hiding place with days of December. Concerning works published in the manage. It doesn't matter what I say. It really doesn't. No matter what I say after dark. It doesn't matter what I say. Secret homicides arranged in a series of pursuits. No matter what I say. Change in stuff, murder forever after. It doesn't matter what I say. Rude and fatal, lacking the hint of conscience. No matter what I say after dark.
Welcome back, and thank you so much for joining us this evening on We Are Paradox Media's Late Night in the Rockies. Tonight, it's Mr. Elvis Presley's birthday. Tonight, we are doing a show with my favorite author, Mr. Stephen B Ubaney, and we're discussing who murdered Elvis Presley. Welcome back, Stephen, and thanks so much for joining us tonight. It's been awesome.
No, it's a pleasure. I'm always eager to share the information, and you know what? The hours fly by when there's so much information to talk about, and giving me a microphone is like giving a peeping Tom Visine. So let's get on with it.
Let's do this.
When last we spoke,
the
talking about
EMTs were leaving and the investigators were going up the stairs.
That's right. So there's a bunch of stuff going on. Not good stuff either. The investigators show up. There's nothing to find. Dan Warlick, the Jerry T. Francisco was a medical examiner in Shelby County, Tennessee at the time, who was the same guy who botched Martin Luther King's autopsy, I think 9 years prior, who had the body butchered so bad they could never determine which way the bullet was coming from.
It's ridiculous.
So, yeah, it's amazing how, well, I don't even get me started. So here comes Dan Warlick, who has been charged with the responsibility of fact-finding. Go investigate, see what you find, Dan. They find nothing. Why? Because they're not supposed to find anything. So he does as much investigative work as he possibly can, takes some photos, scribbles some notes, does some interviews, takes the information, turns it over to Jerry Francisco, who couldn't be more disinterested. And then he turns to Dan and says, would you like to join the autopsy team? Well, they had assembled the best people possible to do this autopsy, and I won't bore you with their names.
That's
There's
not
one
boring to
man.
me at all. It's all interesting, but
There's one man in the autopsy who's a very interesting guy. His name is Dr. Noel Florundo, and we'll come back to him in a second. Remember that name. It's a fun name to say, Noel
no
Florundo.
friendo.
It's a very musical name. So they decide they're going to prep Elvis for the autopsy, and they lift him onto this corkboard. And I asked Dan Warlick, I said, Dan, what was the condition of the body? What did he weigh? How tall was he? Everything. Elvis was 215 pounds, and he was 5'11". No, I'm sorry. He was 205 pounds. I misspoke. And he was 5'11 and a half. And all the stories came out that, he was 300 pounds, this and that. Not true. Not true. So, and he said he looked bad. He said the guy was in rough shape. He hadn't been on tour for a little while. He was supposed to fly out that night to start the next leg of his tour in Portland, Maine. And the greater majority of the security team was already there in Portland, Maine, setting things up, the hotel room and everything that they do to get ready for the show, set up the stage and all that. They're called the 24-hour people. They do that in the circus. They send people ahead to, get ready for the big show. So Graceland at this point is basically an empty hall. There's a couple of maids there. There's a fellow named Dick Robb who's there, who was Elvis's chief of security. Another guy we just lost last year. He wrote a book called The Elvis Conspiracy. I never got a chance to talk to the guy. We had a lot of friends in common. You always think you have time, and you don't. I figure, well, I'll get to him down the road. Well, there was no down the road. So
yeah, you're never promised tomorrow. That's the hard part, because you always think you have time, but it's never promised to you. You have to take the bull by the horns at that moment.
No one is guaranteed tomorrow. No one. So he wrote a book called The Elvis Conspiracy, highlighting in his book the oddities around that day and who he suspects was behind it. Another interesting book. I don't know if it's still in print or not. I know that he ended up apparently in some legal trouble for publishing the book, but it's a hell of a book.
Wow.
Go grab it. So all of this is going on. And when they discovered the body, a fellow named Al Strada, who was in charge of Elvis's wardrobe, was there with Joe Esposito, and Al Strada told the EMTs, we think he OD'd. So they relayed that to...
And that's a weird thing to say.
Quite, yeah. I don't know where that came from. So they relay that to the medical team, and of course now the autopsy. And like I've always said on these interviews, if all you have is a hammer, everything starts to look like a nail. They got to find that nail. So they're looking for drugs, and they got to find them, right? So they know that Elvis Presley is allergic to codeine. 1967 or 68, Elvis had some dental work done, and they gave him codeine.
Yeah, he almost died.
He went into anaphylaxis shock, really bad. Started to itch, his throat started to swell closed, and if Dr. Nikopoulos wasn't on his toes, we would have lost Elvis in 68. So everyone knew, his doctors, his dentists, his nurses, no codeine. Nowhere even close to this guy. He's drastically allergic to codeine. So,
and of all the people Elvis knew what it looked like.
Right, because of, and it was a little terrifying for the guy. It'd be a terrifying thing for anybody. So Elvis's doctor, Nikopoulos, gave him the physician's desk reference, which lists all the drugs, what their side effects are, everything that goes with everything. And Elvis used to study this. He's fascinated by it. He knew more about prescription drugs probably than most pharmacists did.
Well, yeah, look at all the stuff people probably try to give to him all the time. Oh, well, I can't take that because that's this or blah, blah, blah. He knew what it was because he had the book, and he was very good at self-educating himself.
He's a very smart guy. So, he didn't accidentally overdose. He didn't have anaphylactic shock. He didn't do these things. So Dan was telling me, and I said, Dan, what was the hardest part about the autopsy? And he said, well, no autopsy is easy. He said he did an autopsy on Tammy Wynette, that everyone had to leave the room. They were all crying. It was rough. He said, this is not a fun thing. Looks forward to it. He said, with Elvis, the hardest part was looking at him and just realizing the gravity of who this person was. So he said the first cut's always the hardest. And the first cut he made on Elvis was his voice box. They're looking for anaphylaxis, any sort of anaphylaxis shock.
Wasn't
so
there?
They take out his voice box and they look at it, and there's no swelling there. No swelling, no codeine. So they can't figure it out. So Jerry Francisco had said that night earlier to the press, we're going to have an answer to you. I think it was 8 o'clock that night. So now it's 5, 6 o'clock. They're well into the autopsy. They don't have any answers. They take out his organs. All of Elvis Presley's organs are enlarged.
Mm-hmm.
It's not uncommon. It just happens. He just had very large organs. His heart was oversized. His liver was oversized. The kidneys were oversized.
He was an extra large person in so many different ways.
In many different ways. So they decide they're going to take, again, they got to find these drugs, right? Because that's what they've been told. So they take, they do toxicology reports in 2 places locally. One was the University of Tennessee, and one was in an independent lab in Memphis that they still won't reveal where they did that. And they both came back that there were drugs in his system, but they were what would usually be prescribed. And there are different levels of drugs. There's trace. Of course, we know what a trace is. And there's therapeutic, which is what would be prescribed by a doctor. And then there's toxic, which would certainly make you sick. And then, of course, we know what lethal is, which will kill you.
Yeah.
In the case of Elvis Presley, they only found a couple of drugs, and there were 4 types of drugs between trace and therapeutic.
They were all normal.
There's nothing in there that could have killed this guy. So they're bashing their brains out. What the hell killed this guy? So now I'm going to come back to Noel Florundo.
Noel Florundo.
Noel Florundo has an interesting job. And his job was to take Elvis Presley's heart and using special instruments, one team took his heart out. This is terrible to talk about, isn't it?
Yeah.
One team took his heart out and they sliced it every 16th of an inch.
They didn't find anything.
And they took the slices and they handed it to Noel Florundo, who was looking through this microscope, which was, God bless you. You okay?
Yeah, I'm good. I'm sorry I was muted, so nobody heard me but you, but I'm sorry. It's just COVID rearing its ugly head. I will live.
Kind of rough. So, Noel Florundo's looking through all of his organs. They did that with all of his organs, but the heart specifically, right? And they didn't find anything. Now they're looking for blockages, blood clots, anything that would have created this. They did the same thing with Elvis's brain. Dan Warlick took out Elvis's brain. You want to freak out?
Didn't it disappear?
I shook the hand that took out Elvis Presley's brain.
Yeah, they took it out, and then it's gone, right? Like, nobody ever found it again?
No, that was JFK.
Oh, okay.
So, they did the same thing with his brain. They sliced it and examined it under this microscope. And it was Noel Florundo's job. He was a top man. He was a high-class man in that profession. They got the best guy they could get. You didn't find anything. What the hell's going on here? Why is this guy not on stage? They couldn't figure it out. So here's Jerry Francisco, who is now committed to telling the waiting world, giving them something to say in just a few hours, which is miraculous when Marilyn Monroe's coroner took 12 days to come up with her cause of death, Dr. Noguchi. So here we have this guy who's going to go out and give results on what? There's nothing even back yet. I mean, they haven't even, at this point in the autopsy, they hadn't even gotten the toxicology reports back. There's no evidence from Graceland. There's no toxicology reports back. What is this guy going to tell everybody?
Well, plus, like, didn't the stomach contents, instead of those being preserved in a jar or whatever, those were just washed down the drain?
So first thing they did at the Harvey team was they pumped his stomach and washed the entire contents down the drain.
Ridiculous.
What is going on? So they're trying to get to the bottom of this, and Dr. Nikopoulos comes out and tells everybody that Elvis Presley died of cardiac arrhythmia. And impossible for anybody post-mortem to determine cardiac arrhythmia. In order to have AFib or cardiac arrhythmia, which is basically an irregular heartbeat, you have to examine a beating heart. It's impossible after someone dies to determine that. So he just told them a fairy tale so they would just go away quietly. Well, they took a couple days for them to figure out what that term meant, and they didn't accept it. So now the plot thickens. What did kill this guy? So now the press is hounding for answers. They still haven't found those drugs they're looking for, so they take samples of Elvis Presley's tissues, and they put them in Tupperware, and they send them off to bioscience laboratories in California, which at that time was the best of the best. These guys had all the equipment that was necessary, the best stuff that was available to them. And that doctor's name was Harold Sexton, and I don't believe Harold Sexton's still with us either, which is quite a shame. It's funny, I think I'm the only one left that knows all of the information that all of these people cumulatively over the years who told me. So it's bizarre that I'm the sole keeper of this craziness. Anyway, so bioscience laboratories, and they put it under some sort of fictitious name, and they put a stat on it, so I get back real quick. So they come back with codeine at 11 times the lethal level. And, this whole litany of drugs and this and that. And I said, well, it was right here when I said, all right, wait a minute. Where's the flag? Throw the flag, penalty. Hold on. If they didn't find any anaphylaxis in Elvis Presley's body, how can it show up in only one of the 3 toxicology reports at 11 times the lethal level? It's impossible. If it's not in the body, it can't be in the toxicology report. And if you go that far, you've got a massive problem on your hands. So it was right there when I said, hold on a second. Again, we have planted evidence. What are they trying to hide? All kinds of motives to murder Elvis Presley. We've talked about the mob. We've talked about the FBI, and he was stuck right between the two of them. Okay. In the book, and again, get the book. It's an ebook and audio book all the way around the world. It's on Kindle. If you want a physical copy, go to my website, whomurderedbooks.com. I'll even autograph it for you. Tell me who you want me to autograph it to. I'll do that.
And the writing's impeccable. Like, not just the writing of the book, but the signature. It's beautiful.
Well, thank you. I've recently been upgraded from author to action figure, so everybody
really
can love my yes, get the official upgrade. So
hell yes.
Get the book. You need to know all the information. I don't like to send people to Amazon. I think it's very impersonal to get a physical book. I want to come in contact with the people who read. I want to know what you think. There's a form on my website. Fill it out. I make myself available. Hop on Facebook. Steve Ubaney, Ubaney. I'm out there on Facebook. Friend me on Facebook. I'm out there. I'm always out if you want to chat.
Oh my gosh, I don't even think we're friends on Facebook. I try to find you.
Well, shame on you.
I'm going to have to look again. Because I'm like, maybe it's because I put Steven instead of Steve.
There you go.
I'm looking right now. Oh, there you are. Yep, we're friends. We're friends.
I had 2 accounts. One was maxed out at 5,000, and the other one is got a couple of hundred. But yeah, I'm on Twitter. Hop on out there. I'm always out there. So we talked about the mob and the FBI and the motives behind murdering Elvis Presley, but there's motives that no one knows about, or very few people know about now. Elvis was reorganizing his life, and he was very unhappy with some things. He had let a couple people go who were bodyguards who had
And
who
that
were
wasn't
suspects.
even his fault. It's
No.
like, I'm sorry my dad did that, but I really love you guys. Like, you should realize that. But people were just like, F you, I'm done, I'm gone, instead of realizing what was really going on.
It was a really rough time. Elvis was also writing people out of his will.
I think
Elvis,
that was a good idea on some parts.
there were two wills when Elvis Presley died. One that the one that he had wrote people in, and then it was days before Elvis died that the will went into effect, and many of the people in his circle were written out, and they knew he was written out. They were written out for two reasons. Ginger Alden was one of the witnesses to the will, and the other one was forgive me, I can't think of the man's name. Charlie Hodge, another one of Elvis Presley's close personal friends.
Wow.
They knew and spread the word, I'm sure. It's a tight group that these people have been written out. A lot of motive here. Besides that, boy, I'm telling you what, there's so much bad blood around him.
I know.
Elvis Presley's doctor, Dr. Nicopolis, owed him $275,000. He borrowed money from Elvis to do
Holy
a
shit.
major...
Oh, yeah, he opened a clinic and stuff, right?
Right. And he was a suspect in my book. And again, these aren't the people who I like or dislike. I happen to like Dr. Nicopolis. It didn't matter about that. What I do in my book is I gather all the evidence and I come up with the suspects. And I run the suspects through motive, means, and opportunity, which is the criminal process.
Right.
And I don't run the evidence runs the show. I just let it flow where it flows. And whoever comes out at the other end is the person or persons who murdered these people. And all of my books are all written the same way. So that's basically what this book is about. There's a lot of... Oh, I forgot to mention, Vernon Presley was so convinced that he knew who murdered his son. He hired 2 private investigators.
He spent a lot of money.
Yeah. And they were really close to cracking the case. Unfortunately, Elvis died in 1977. Vernon was in bad health. Vernon died 2 years later, and the probe was never finished.
So it's just like, for me, I feel like it's too bad that Priscilla was like so off the fucking planet at that point that they couldn't have worked together, you know. She should have cared because her daughter, you know, her daughter's future was involved in this. She should have been at the precipice where her and Vernon could have worked together to figure this out, but I think she was just so hurt. Not Elvis's fault, I don't really think. It's because of Captain Asshat and everything else going on there, that she was very perturbed and hurt and jaded, and so that caused a lot of issues, and she did change her name, and then after he died she changed it back, and a lot of people feel badly about that, but I think it has a lot to do with her daughter and trying to protect her. But at the same time, shit, you know, like you said, he died 2 years later. Had she been in the picture too, right along with his dad, Mr. Vernon, she could have carried on the torch or whatever and figured this thing out.
Well, it's hard. It's, you know, when you look on the outside, when you're on the outside looking in, we don't know what's on the inside. There's got to be a reason that didn't happen. And Lisa Marie, I'm glad you brought that up. These Elvis is alive people, they're missing something. There's nothing on this planet that Elvis Presley loved more than Lisa Marie.
And she was there that night, and she did not go to bed like she was supposed to.
She was there that night. Do you honestly believe that if Elvis Presley was alive, he would stand by and let her suffer through what she suffered through?
No, hell no.
There's no way. This girl, and she's a sweetheart too, by the way, this girl has suffered through unspeakable, divorce after divorce, all kinds. I guess she was involved in substance abuse of some variety. Her son just committed suicide.
Oh, there's God.
There's no way Elvis Presley would be on this planet and not help her.
No. He loved her so much. Like, that was his heart. That was his number one thing. The music, everything else was something else, but that was his heart.
Absolutely. And there's something else. If the inner circle knew that Elvis faked his death, one of Elvis's friends was Jerry Schilling, who was a very good friend to Elvis. I don't know him, never spoke with him. I mean, maybe someday I will. I hope I do. He tells a story about getting the news and being so enraged that he punches a brick wall and shatters his hand.
Fuck.
Has to have an operation on his hand. He's so out of his mind with grief.
Yeah.
Do you really think that would have happened if Elvis had faked his death? Or
No.
Somebody was in on it? Like I said, these Elvis is alive people are finding evidence. It's evidence that's been planted there to find, to keep them running in circles and away from solving the murder. Why do you think they don't want anyone upstairs at Graceland? It's a crime scene. How many people do you really want walking through a crime scene? And there's something else that happened that was very, very strange. Dan Warlick, God, I really miss this guy. And I put in my book, I was driving through Nashville. And I'm a New Yorker, so Western New York, I don't talk like the other ones. Way west, west of Buffalo. I'm from that area, and I don't get down to Tennessee very often. So when I do get down there, I like to visit the people that I know. And Dan Warlick was one of those people. I've met with him, I don't know, I think 3 times. Had dinner with him a couple times. And I really like the guy. So I was going through Tennessee, going through Nashville, and I opened my phone, and I was going to call Dan. Disconnected. That's weird. The cell phone's disconnected.
Yeah, and it wasn't like a week or two before that.
Sorry?
Maybe I'm thinking of someone else, but I think a week or two before that, his cell phone was working, but then all of a sudden it's not.
I don't know about a week or two before, but I called his phone and his office. I didn't have his home phone. Everything's disconnected. So I pull over to check the number, and I type in Dan Warlick on Google. The guy's dead. You talk about being robbed of not only a terrific investigator and a great lawyer and a great guy, but also a friend who, we talked about this to ad nauseum. It's really sad that I'm at that point in life where I'm losing these people who have told me a lot of stories, but Dan is one of them. All of Elvis Presley's death had all kinds of signs of a mob hit. The mob likes to humiliate tough guys, and what they do when they do you in is they'll pull your pants down. It's the final insult. They did it to Sonny Liston. Sonny Liston was supposed to take a dive, and he ended up almost exactly the same way Elvis Presley did. Except with him was a little different. He had ended up with needle marks in his arm, and they had marijuana on the counters and this and that. And again, more things just like the syringe to clutter the crime scene, and it's a red herring, go chase it. Sonny Liston was horribly afraid of needles. And there was no drugs in his body. There were just needle marks in his arm. He was nude from the waist down. He was supposed
Probably fresh needle marks, like not old track marks or anything. Some fresh marks, probably when they freaking killed him.
Well, that's exactly right. And he was supposed to throw a boxing match. And, of course, he didn't. And he paid the price. It's just all of these Mussolini, same thing. They hung Mussolini up, bare-assed. This is what they do to humiliate tough guys when they get across you on the wrong side. The sanitized death scene, oh, man.
It's pretty prevalent. People think it's really rare, but look at all these different ones.
What really got my blood boiling is that when Dan Warlick went home that night after the autopsy, and he was sitting in his apartment, and we talked at length about this, but it's a timed show, so I can't go into everything. he took all of the sketches and all of his notes and all of the photographs and everything of upstairs at Graceland and the death scene, and he put it in the front seat of his car, the passenger seat.
Oh my God, I remember this.
Goes to bed, wakes up in the morning, the car's burglarized. The only thing that's missing is the evidence. You know, tell that.
And I always think like, okay, I drive in my car with my important shit. I take my important shit everywhere with me. But sometimes people think of their car as some sort of safe lockbox or whatever. They think this is the safest place to leave this stuff, so they'll leave it there. But for me, it's just like, nope. I'm going to take my stuff. I'm going to take it with me. If it's that important, I'm going to put it under my pillow. But yeah, he left it in his little car safe box there. And it's gone.
Tell that to one of these Elvis alive people and watch their head explode. They don't see the other side of, they're seeing literally this tiny little tip of the iceberg. But once they dig and dig and dig and dig and dig, that can't be right anymore. Like I said, I was in that camp for a long, long time. And then the other evidence just blew my mind. So, there are parallels to Elvis Presley's death scene, the sanitized death scene. Princess Diana, she dies, and what do? They call in specialized equipment to sanitize the tunnel. They reopen the tunnel. Business as usual.
Have you seen other things where, people drive off the bridge or different things like this happen? They close off the roadway, however many hours it takes to secure the crime scene. And these guys are coming in with pressure washers and all kinds of other shit and spraying it away. Not even allowing people in there to help her, just letting her sit there and suffer in this wreckage forever.
For some reason, all these highly trained professionals just tend to forget their job. JFK. Talk about sanitized death scene. He gets his brain blown out. They're taking his body into Parkland, which was, they should have just taken him. Don't pass go. Don't collect the $100. Just go right to the mortuary.
Right.
I don't know what they thought they were going to do with that, but they had to try, just like with Elvis. So his body is in there, and they're working on him. What's Secret Service doing? They've got a bucket and sponges, and they're washing the blood splatter out of the limousine. What?
It's insane.
This is a crime scene. Why do you think they make crime scene tape?
And they're like, oh, she was dead on the scene. Did you not see the picture of her leaning out of the wreckage? Like, oh, making the face of, this really fucking hurts really bad. Somebody help me. Why is nobody helping me? She was not dead on the scene. She was still alive for very long after the accident.
When it comes to the ultimate sanitized death scene and just general crap, one must stand in awe of Marilyn Monroe. And I will not write this book. I know somebody who has, and I won't do this. When you... This is unbelievable. I still can't get through this without laughing. Detectives show up to Marilyn Monroe's death scene, and the housekeeper is doing the laundry from the death scene. What? The housekeeper's doing the laundry?
Guess what? The person that was trying to break in was trying to break in from the inside. Okay?
Yeah, they staged a break-in, but they made a mistake. If you break the glass is supposed to be on the opposite side of the house. They had
from the inside out, not the out. Yeah, from the outside in, not the inside out.
And talk about planted things. Elvis, we had the syringes at the death scene.
Mm-hmm.
The pristine bullet that suddenly emerges off a gurney in the JFK thing.
What makes my mind swirl with the whole Elvis thing is the new girlfriend, which for many years, not until I read your book, was I privy to the sucky ass new girlfriend. And I'm like, wow, where'd he find this piece? I will leave the other words out of it. But, oh, hey, don't have too much fun when you're in there reading your book in the bathroom. And then she goes out with her little Jorge's, fuck buddies, whatever you want to call them. and does her thing, and they come back hours later and find him dead. And then they have this whole story about, how he played tennis and then how he played music and how he did all these other things that he never fucking did, just to make the story look better. And then she showered and got all prettied up before she even made a real report. It's like, seriously, what actually happened? There's so many, like, mind fucks is what I want to call it going on here. My mind is blown in so many different directions because of all this stuff that people are trying to do.
There's a lot of things in this book that we can't even touch. I've tried to give a little bit of an overview, but when Elvis dies, ask yourself a question. How did they have all of the records printed? How did they have all the t-shirts already made for them to roll out for sale that afternoon?
Mm-hmm.
Elvis Presley stood in the way of not only the mob and the FBI and some disgruntled people around him. A veritable fortune was made after his death. His likeness. In 1974, Colonel Parker started Boxcar Enterprises, which Elvis knew about, and like everything, it was unfair to Elvis, the business arrangement.
Yeah.
It was just basically giving Colonel Parker the licensing agreement to use his image and sell his name and his likeness for posters and so forth.
I know. I was so in love with the guy at the age of 13. I'm like, I want some Elvis tapes. I want some Elvis posters. I want Elvis this, Elvis that. And one of the big ones for me was the Elvis Jailhouse Rock poster in my room. And I realized today it wasn't Elvis or his family making any sort of money off of this. This was Captain Asshat making money off of me because I loved Elvis and this particular picture. Like, he made so much money off of these different pictures and buttons and posters and whatever else, and his family has seen nothing of it. Even though my heart was in the right place, they totally took advantage of the monetary.
And you know what? They still are. There are still people whose entire existence are feasting off the specter of this fantastic man, and it's happening. And you know what? It's never going to stop.
Nope.
I mean, Elvis was, he was abused in life. Did they really have to exploit him in death too?
Yep.
I mean, it's very, very sad.
That's where they make most of the money.
Oh, yeah. And Elvis Presley, alive Elvis Presley, was standing in the way of all of that.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, the amount of, the guy simply couldn't live. He had to be murdered. He was standing in the way of billions of dollars, and outside of the people who he managed to piss off were very, very powerful people. I mean, it's you just buy the book. I can't do this justice, but there's one other thing I have to come back to Marilyn Monroe.
Mm-hmm.
When I say the trifecta of the sanitized death scene and the staged burglary.
Oh my gosh.
Her body was repositioned.
Oh, it was.
When someone dies, and you know this.
Yep.
When someone dies, the little water pump in your body called your heart stops,
mm-hmm.
and your blood settles on the lowest level.
Wherever you're laying.
That's exactly right. So, and it's something called liver mortis. Stupid name, I know. Liver mortis. It's not rigor mortis. It's
You're like,
liver
how come
mortis.
it's not like heart mortis or whatever? Yeah, it's just what it's called. Sorry.
Yep, I didn't. Crazy. So that creates this purplish hue, purplish mar on wherever your lowest part of your body is. If you die face down, your face will have this purplish hue. Well, in the case of Marilyn Monroe, her body was repositioned so the purplish hue was on the cheek of her face, pointing up, not down.
Nope, makes no sense.
This one really hit the trifecta. I would say what bothered me the most about this one is I think number one that they're not going to tell the truth about this because it's not in their best interest. They're going to keep cash in the cash register. And that's the first thing. And the second thing is that how much he did for everybody else. You know, when Elvis died, there were letters that were written to Vernon. Elvis Presley was financially supporting, I think, 32 or 33 needy families in and around Memphis, and he didn't
He was
tell anybody.
awesome.
You know, he knew what it was
Real
like.
humanitarian.
He was a really nice guy.
Yeah.
Sonny West told me a story one time. Sonny was one of Elvis's bodyguards. That there was an article in the newspaper. They were eating breakfast, and breakfast to Elvis was probably 2:00 in the afternoon.
Me too.
And they were all sitting around, and Marty Lacker was one of Elvis's employees, Memphis Mafia members, who's also gone now. It's hard to believe. And he's reading this newspaper article, and it's about this woman in Memphis who had no legs. And she had a couple kids, and she had grandchildren, and there was a story about this incredible woman. So Marty reads this and said, Elvis, you need to take a look at this. So Elvis reads this article, and he tells Marty, find out where she lives.
Mm-hmm.
He got the address. That night, Priscilla, Sonny West, Elvis, and I think there might have been someone else, or I can't remember. Elvis went out and he bought this real fancy battery-powered electric wheelchair, top-of-the-line thing. It probably cost as much as a Cadillac. And he hand-delivered it.
Yeah, especially back in that day.
Yeah, and he knocked on the door and gave it to her. And, you know, Sonny said that he was showing her how it worked. He said, you know, I don't really know all this much about it, but I think this works this way, and you just do this. And they get in the car. They're all choked up. You know, there's tears in their eyes.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they're leaving. And Sonny turns to him and says, you know, Elvis, I don't think she knew who you were. And he said, that's okay, Sonny. She knows it's somebody.
Yeah, that's not what's important.
It's crazy. So here's this guy who did all of this for all of these other people. And we can't even do him the dignity of, number one, acknowledging the fact that this guy was murdered, and number two, starting an investigation to get the bastard who did it. And that's what really keeps me up at night. Some nights. And then other nights I have to realize, you know what? Look at the world we're living in. Does it really surprise you?
Well, and also look at your book. Okay, so we're not telling people for a specific reason, because you need to go out, you need to buy this book, you need to read it, and you need to see the other things that we did not talk about. And it's really hard for me not to say anything, because I'm like, I know. But you need to buy this book and read it and see what actually happened that night with the shady-ass girlfriend and all these other assholes and different crazy people that showed up that never showed up before, that were allowed inside these gates that were impenetrable. Like, it's just insane to me how this could happen. But we are at the last 5 minutes of our show. So can you tell our listeners again how to find your Who Murdered series and how to purchase your books, etc.?
Well, as I said before, my books are available in ebook and audiobook and Kindle all the way around the world. If you live in the U.S. or if you're in Canada and you want to get a physical copy of my books, I'll autograph it for you for sure. Go to my website. Go to whomurderedbooks.com. Crazy, stupid website name, but it fits, right? whomurderedbooks.com.
It does fit.
And, you know, order yourself a book. And if you buy in bulk, you can get a 25% discount. I think we've got it set up where if you buy 3, you get 1 free or some crazy thing. I can't remember exactly how it works. We just did that the other night, so I'm not really sure. But the next book is going to be on Nikola Tesla. And
I can't wait.
That one will be, that's my
I'm so
swan
excited.
song. Yeah, that's my swan song. I'm going to start writing that in March. And on the other side of that one, I'm going to actually resume this thing called life.
I know, I've been thinking like all week, I'm like, man, he's sitting here and he's doing all these different interviews and stuff. How's he gonna find time to be writing this book when he's doing interviews on all these other books that are just as awesome? In a sense, like for me, I am a really big Elvis Presley fan, but at the same time, Nikola Tesla is my numero uno hero. So I'm just
Very
like,
interesting.
how are you finding time to write this book and you're doing interviews on all these other books at the same time? It's got to be so time consuming, because I know you're
Yeah.
doing it like every freaking day of the week. It's like,
Yeah.
Steven, are you
I
leaving
think I did.
time to sleep and stuff? Like, what are you doing?
It's I did. I think I did 87 shows last year.
Holy shit.
And between that and, of course, we all work a day job. You know, the myth that authors, you know, are independently wealthy and
That'd
live
be
on a
nice,
big
right?
hill, you know, in this big castle on a hill. You know, of course, you know, that's long gone. I'm just an average fellow like everybody else. But reach out to me if you want to discuss something. I'm on, like I said, I'm on Twitter, Steve Ubaney, Ubaney. I'm on Twitter. I'm on Facebook. You know, like me, follow me, talk to me, whatever you want. I always make myself available. I don't say that I have fans. I have readers. Okay.
Well, I mean,
So reach
fan.
out to me and go on Facebook and go join these groups. The group is Elvis Who Murdered Him and Princess Diana Who Murdered Her. So, you know, you can reach out to me that way too. I always try to make myself available within the, you know, the parameters of the 45 minutes of sleep I get a night, you know.
Right? Me too. How are we still alive? Well, I want to thank you so much once again, Stephen, for being my guest this evening on We Are Paradox Media's Late Night in the Rockies. It's been a pleasure to have you once more, and I can't wait to have you again on the 19th when, no, actually, that's last month. Later on this month when we're talking about FDR.
Oh, that's right. I'm going to be on again this month.
Yeah.
Wow. I'm trying to squeeze everything in before March, because after March I'm going bye-bye. No more interviews for a while. I have to write the Tesla book. So
Yeah, we
And it
got
takes
you
me-
in on the 16th for the FDR.
it takes me forever to write these books. I have the oldest typewriter in the world. It types in pencil.
Well, you're doing an awesome job at it, and I'm so super proud of you. And I have to say, you are my favorite author because, like I said, it's so easy for me to get into your books. Yes, the FDR was a little harder for me than other ones, but I still got in there and I was able to read it within a day. And so I really recommend these books to people. But thank you so much again, Stephen, for being on. You're awesome.
It's a pleasure. I will talk to you again soon. Thank you.
Thank you. And please hang on if you want to come into the after party. And I also want to thank all of our friends on We Are Paradox Media's KPNL Radio, Facebook, Twitter, iHeartRadio, and wherever else beyond the Omniverse you've been listening tonight. I had a wonderful time, and I can't wait to do it again. Tomorrow night, we're going to do story time with me, TessaTNT. I think we're going to do a replay of the original War of the Worlds. If you guys are into that, make sure you tune in. We're going to do that for at least the first hour and a half, and then we'll be talking about that afterwards. But don't forget, you guys, we are all in this together. Together, we can make the world a little better. And together, my friends, we are Paradox Media, because without you, there is no us. Night night.